Welcome, one and all, to the K.O.E. Nation. How are we doing, all you beautiful people out there? Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is I, the man of the hour, the man with the power, the man that makes the other podcast cower, your king of extreme, Phil K.O.E., the lord of the Scottish Highlands, the prince and potentate of the political parlance, and one damn handsome man, if I do say so myself. How are we all doing this evening, all of you beautiful people? I thought this would be a good time to get together for a little Sunday chat. Now, all of the internet is a buzz, isn't it? At least all of Twitch is. How are we doing, all of you beautiful people, this evening? I am Phil K.O.E. of as you can see in the down here parts of K.O.E. Nation on YouTube, K.O.E. Nation on Twitch, and K.O.E. Nation on TikTok. Yes, this is all very on brand. So how are we doing this evening, folks? I want to know how all of you are doing, and we're going to get into what Twitch is all a buzz about this evening, and that is a debate between one Destiny and ROB NOERR. We're going to get into that, and you're going to get the very best analysis possible, the greatest. But first, let's make Double Dog sure. Yes, you're getting the beautiful, sweet, soft summer sounds that are my voice, and you're loving every second of it. So how are we all doing, folks? Let's see. Alrighty. I was just reading some personal comments from some buddies of mine, talking about like, oh God, should we stream this here? So should we stream it there? Because folks, tonight is too hot for social media. We're going to be getting into some real analysis, and you're going to get the greatest analysis you could ever hope for from moi, your king of extreme, the man of the hour, the man with the power, the man that makes the other podcast cower. My goodness. I mean, you already know all this. I'm the man so nice I have to intro myself twice. But so, folks, without further ado, especially after you subscribe to K.O.E. Nation on YouTube, follow me on Twitch, and then also follow me on TikTok, we're going to get into just a little bit of this. I made sure to get us right to the spicy parts, and don't worry, folks, don't worry. Unless I have to like get up and go to the restroom or something during this, you will have nothing but my beautiful, beautiful face here. You're going to get the big Phil K.O.E. face here. Oh, we got some, hey, Norwalk IRL with K.O.E. 2024. Definitely check Norwalk's good shit. And Binks, baby, how we doing there? How we doing? Welcome to the show. We're going over, this is a big time debate that everybody's really getting into deep on Twitch. And I figured, there's some back and forth, and there's some stuff that even I would like to put some analysis in. I also sent out kind of a sonar invite to anybody within the K.O.E. Nation, anyone within Big Buckin' Empire, anybody within the Yanked Up podcast, anyone within Dads Worldwide, anyone within any of those kingdoms. I sent out an invite to them if they want to jump on and kind of join in on the fun, if you will. But God bless all y'all beautiful people out there. Now, without further ado, let's Binks says, Phil, why don't you have a Twitch? Actually, I'm broadcasting right now on Twitch at K.O.E. Nation on Twitch. I will make sure right now. But I know for certain, yep, I'm rolling right now on Twitch, good sir. Yes. In fact, if that's something that interests you, you should definitely go check out and follow K.O.E. Nation, just all one word. It's not like YouTube where it's two. I know, a slight deviation of brand. Oh my goodness. Yeah, DZ Drunk. Yeah, I can see me on Twitch. Oh, welcome. How we doing, all you beautiful people? And thanks for being here. And I figured this would be a good way to spend the evening while we have a little chat about this, because there was some times I was listening to this, I was like, oh, that's a very good point, Destiny. Then there's other times where I'm like, wow, Rob did his homework here. It was a fascinating one. It was a very fascinating back and forth. But folks, yes, do not worry, because if you are here, you are getting the very best analysis possible on the web today, the K.O.E. Nation. So without further ado, let's get into the first few moments. But don't worry. My beautiful mug will be right here front and center, unless I need to run off camera to like grab some tissues or go to the bathroom.
Okay. Yeah, I can give an opening statement. So I don't know exactly what anyone has to defend to claim that Biden and his presidency has been a net positive. There are things that maybe you could say that he did that were okay on certain things, but I don't know how anyone could say that if you had to say whether or not you would consider his presidency good, would say that's the case. So I'll get to my reasons why. First is we have to say that it's not just Joe Biden, but it's actually his administration. And one, that's only fair. You would do that with any presidency, but particularly with the Biden presidency, because he's basically not all there. And more than any president in my lifetime, he's a figurehead. There are people behind the scenes that are actually running it. He doesn't know where he's at.
I was even wearing a different
Nonetheless, the
overshirt
buck
for a
stops
few
with
days.
Biden, so that's what we'll be talking about. I've basically broken down into three categories, the areas where I think that Biden is a failure, or perhaps that someone could definitely argue that he succeeded. The first would be foreign policy. Second would be domestic policy. The third's like more of a catch-all. I would say like scandals or sort of his impression as president and things like that.
I mean, I'm sorry, but that is a little funny. It's like you fail at foreign policy, you fail at domestic policy, and then like, what are you throwing it there? You fail at metaphysical policy at this point. But like, whoa, like how much more failure can you really throw around if you say he's failed foreign and domestic? But yes, new shirt this evening, of course. I realized one time that like I was wearing the same shirt one night when I was going over another video where I was on another panel, and that was like epic sartorial resplendency.
So on foreign policy, there is no arguing that I could see to make the case that Biden has been a success on foreign policy. He entered his presidency with historic Middle East peace deals. Soon after entering, we saw fighting in the Middle East with Israel, Palestine. We saw the ability, we had to bomb Syria because allegedly Iran was attacking U.S. interests there. So we saw disaster.
I made really good friends with Dylan when I gave my thoughts on Syria. I could just tell he wanted to push a cream pie through the camera into my face when I was giving my, and Biden gets us into a war in Syria. Like, oh, he did not like that. He was not at all pleased. But yeah, so whenever I think back to whenever people are talking about that particular campaign, that was actually one of the times I actually first met Dylan. So
Esther's bombing campaigns in Syria because a third country did something terrible. We saw France being pissed because at the last minute they were left out of a nuclear sub deal. And that's one of the things that we were told with Biden. He would bring respect back to our allies. Our allies know that he's a joke, like France being upset with this situation. He was censured in the UK because of his disastrous pullout of Afghanistan without correctly working with the UK in order to do so. So you can see that our allies are furious. The Afghanistan debacle was one of the biggest egg on face things that has occurred to the U.S. foreign policy wise since Vietnam. American troops died. Hundreds of Americans were left behind. He actually allowed Bagram Air Base to be taken over, which allowed ISIS to be freed, which allowed ISIS to then kill our troops. He relied on the Taliban, the very group that freed those ISIS troops, for security in Afghanistan and the sole air base that we had left, which was predictably a disaster. He brought a bunch of people in that he claimed were vetted that we now know weren't vetted. So this was a disaster. Then after getting egg on his face, he decided to prove that he was a tough guy by bombing ISIS-K, which actually was just a bunch of children that he murdered. Our enemies are emboldened. We see Russia being emboldened with Ukraine. We see China being emboldened with Taiwan. Foreign policy is a disaster. Domestic policy, some of the big areas that I think we could hit on, his COVID policies have been a disaster. If anything, he should have at least been better than Donald Trump on this. He wasn't. It seems his entire plan is to rely on the vaccine that was created under Trump. That's about it. On the economy,
I mean, he could really start pushing in with a strong point on the Trump's vaccine if you wanted, but he's starting to overuse the word disaster. I'm starting to notice that.
We have historic inflation. We have stagnation. Things are looking horrible when it comes to the economy. We can get more to that. We have a border crisis. We have supply chain issues and energy problems. So much so, and even if you're progressive and you're for Green New Deal type stuff, I mean, the guy's begging OPEC to increase the production of fossil fuels after he's basically virtue signaling that we need to end fossil fuels. Last thing is scandals and things like that. Let's not forget he offered that we still don't know who the 10% that was going to the big guy, which only makes sense in this context because it seems really weird that Biden is unwilling to criticize China.
Hey, Mr. Saxakey, thank you. Thank you. Sending love my way, sending love back yours too. God bless. God bless. We're getting into some debate analysis. At one point, it gets a little bit heated, but this one's actually intellectual to the point where you can actually have analysis on it. It's not just like, so it's interesting. Glad to have you. God bless and come
about
on
COVID.
in, all y'all.
Even if you don't think that COVID came from a lab in China, remember one of the first things Biden did was disband Trump's task force, seeing the origins of COVID. Then after public pressure, he actually restarted it, which, surprise, surprise, they came to no conclusion within like a month or two afterwards. But he doesn't criticize China for this. Even if China didn't create it in a lab, we know that they lied over and over, which led to the spread happening initially. And yet, for some reason, Biden never wants to criticize China for that. We see that the FBI is targeting parents. We see that they're targeting political opposition. And we see that they're acting as a Gestapo, putting political prisoners in jail without their due process rights, such as some of the people that didn't commit violence January 6th and the terrible things that are happening there. He's telling people to ignore the courts. When the courts ruled against his mandates, he's basically telling them to rule against them. He has dementia. And if I could speak to Destiny just for a second, look no further to the things you've been arguing about with the Kyle Rittenhouse and how horrible our media is. Joe Biden led to that by directly calling Kyle Rittenhouse a white supremacist. He claimed that his reason for running for president was because Donald Trump said Nazis were good people. That's
fine people hoax, one of the most dangerous hoaxes in American politics.
Out of the media comes straight from the top, from the Biden presidency. So last thing I'll say is this: the polls don't lie. We don't have.
Yeah, they do.
People, but
a lot.
Clear that even
okay, sorry. Like Rob, we've talked before. You're a nice guy, but all right. I'm gonna put up two scores here, and whenever I go like, oh, that's a fucking killer, I might put. But Rob, you're starting off -1 because you're saying the polls don't lie. I mean, if that was the case, we'd all be talking about the second term of President Hillary Clinton if the polls were always correct. But you starting off on the back
Biden's
foot.
Been a big disaster, and there's even scuttlebutt inside the party that they might seek someone different in 2024 because they know he's been a disaster. That's it.
All right, Destiny.
Geez, I wrote down talking points, but I guess I don't want my opening statement to just be to respond to every single Rob talking about.
Now, Rob's starting to overuse the word disaster. Where Destiny is going to do good here is Destiny is a walking thesaurus. So he's going to, like, when I say it cannot be disputed, denied, or anything, it cannot be any of those types of things. Like, it cannot be disputed or denied. It sounds great, but it's kind of the same thing. But, once in a while, you got to put music to what you're saying. Otherwise, shit.
I imagine we'll get into that in the back and forth.
Life's not fun
in terms of the three major things that I kind of wanted to focus on, I think that the coronavirus relief is obviously going to be a big part. I think that Biden had accomplished some historic parts in this coronavirus relief. One of the big focuses is obviously going to be the quasi-UBI that he started with the child tax credit.
Oh, and Mr. Saxakey, you're saying... Mr. Saxakey says, appreciate you, dog. Even as a socialist, I genuinely enjoy you and your content. Well, as a capitalist, I feel myself much the greater prophet for having made your acquaintance, Mr. Saxakey. Thank you very much.
This is the thing that most people talk about, the slashing of childhood poverty, the ensuring of food delivery to a lot of these children as a result of having that money to these families. We can also talk about the unemployment insurance, which was a great stimulus to the majority of the American people. I believe the U.S. gave out more stimulus than any country in the world, except maybe Japan, which I thought was really great because the U.S. is historically seen as a country that is unwilling to give stimulus to its people when they're hurting. The second thing that we'll go into is Afghanistan. I think that Biden was incredibly brave in pulling out of Afghanistan. I think that there are a million reasons why weaker leaders would have stayed. Because they were worried about getting a little bit of egg on their face because that pullout was never going to be clean. I think that given the Doha deal that had already been signed in agreement with Donald Trump, who didn't involve the Afghanistan government in that agreement, I don't think that anything else could have possibly happened with that, but perhaps we'll get into that as well. And then on the third thing, the infrastructure bill is the largest infrastructure bill in history that's passed in the United States. Over $500 billion authorized in new spending. Rob said earlier that Biden virtue signaled on green energy when this infrastructure bill directly funds a lot of green energy, which I believe is the opposite of virtue signaling. There's a million other things we can talk about. The idea about blaming Biden for fighting in Israel and Palestine when Trump was the one that moved the embassy east from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem is laughable. The idea that bombing Syria is a horrible thing when Trump also bombed Syria. The idea that our enemies are emboldened when there was a widespread amount of disrespect for Donald Trump as a leader when he was doing things like photo ops with Kim Jong-un, where his own Secretary of State was telling him, yeah, these talks fell apart, nothing happened. If you want to talk about emboldening enemies, I think that Trump obviously won there versus anything else. Yeah, but I don't want to respond to every point in the opening statement. We can just go back
The
and forth on
fact that
some
North
particular
Korea
things you want.
wasn't on a war footing
yeah, I'm
for a
good.
few years was actually a pretty good thing. Ah, no, you don't. Nice try. Rotten YouTubery advertisements. Good God. Nice try. Nice try. Unless they're sending me an actual check, I'm not going to play the whole ad. Damn it. And I was about to say, what? Another mobile game? I didn't know. Shit, I thought we were running out of those. I thought the world was almost out of them fucking mobile app games.
Doors open then.
All right, if you don't mind, just to set the stage for this debate, I think the Biden presidency has been terrible. How would you rate it? Would you say it's just okay or it's good?
Given the set of circumstances, I would say that Biden, if you would have asked me what he could have accomplished with a 50-person Senate, I would say that he has exceeded my expectation in almost every possible manner by this point in time. I would have never expected it to be as effective as it has been. I wouldn't have thought anything would have gotten done. That would have been my guess.
Okay, so, but getting things done isn't necessarily an indicator of whether or not those things getting done are good, right? So just saying that he's been able to mire through red tape that you thought he wouldn't have been. Like when we look at the actual day-to-day lives of Americans, like
Now, I'm going to be honest here. Okay. Destiny's opening statement was very strong, but it was a rehearsed speech. I mean, you could all hear that. Like it was like a WWE promo that's been during the COVID era. Like just, and tonight I will defeat you, you no good rapscallion full of suffering succotash. Like it was a very prepared statement. That part right there was really good. That was good persuasion where he talked about on a 50-50 Senate, he has exceeded any expectations because at that point you can really temper because then you're setting the expectations so low that, you know, you can pretty much say is kind of like I said in the debates. So long as Biden doesn't have a major medical episode on stage, he should exceed all expectations, and that's more or less how it works. And that's how Destiny's he's setting up soft expectations, which is a good step in persuasion. And honestly with his I'm gonna give 1 point. Okay, all right, I'm gonna give 1 point for that one because it was overall just well crafted, good persuasion, and I have to give it its due when it shows up.
the first issue you talked about, COVID. Would you say that Biden's been a success on that issue of COVID?
I mean, it's hard to say. I don't know how much the president, like a lot of this is going to come down to a state by state decision and sometimes even a county by county decision on how they want to manage the coronavirus. In terms of what the president is able to do, the mandating all federal workers get vaccinated and have masks, the distribution of vaccines to the United States citizens, which I believe are still all completely free. I mean, like these are good things, but I mean, the president can only reach so much into states when states still have the authority to write their own policy.
Okay, so we'll get in. We can start with COVID if you want, but I'll just say in general,
the Fed can always twist
stance
the arm of a state.
But if I could guess, I would think that you would thought that Trump was terrible on COVID. It's frustrating to me to see a lot of people in our national media and in the Democratic Party that wanted to blame Trump for every death that occurred under COVID with him. They didn't say, well, actually, it was more up to the states and things like that. And then when it's Biden, they're like, well, he can only do so much when we see that there are more deaths under him than there were under Trump.
Yeah. So when people say that Trump was terrible on COVID, there is only so much that a president can do, but a president can provide guidance. That's all a president can do. Trump's guidance was first non-existent and then terrible. I would say that Biden's guidance has been good. But I mean, we could conceive of a world where Trump's guidance was better, but there were still deaths. But at that point, I wouldn't be blaming Trump over it. I mean, we literally had, thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of cases in the US that were still undiagnosed on a formal level. While Trump was denying that the coronavirus even existed or that it was even coming or that it wasn't going to be a big deal. To compare Trump's lead up to that over and over and over again and the lackluster pushing of getting, the PPE and everything doled out to what Biden has done, which has been to take it incredibly seriously. I would take Biden a million times over. If Biden would have been president instead of Trump, we probably would have been in a better position to absorb this virus than how we have now.
What would he have done differently?
So recognizing that it existed formally in the beginning, probably would have spurred on more American support for things like PPE or like social distancing, rather than Trump, who continually denied it. And even today, when Trump says, hey guys, maybe you should get vaccinated, people are like, nah, fuck no. So I think that type of like moral or spiritual or leadership guidance would have gotten the American public in general to be in a more receptive state for state governors and then county and city leaders to enact these types of social distancing or other regulations to slow the spread of the virus.
I think that this is a cop out for several reasons. One, the idea that it's not the policies and stuff, but it's mere just their guidance, their leadership. This is bullshit. Secondly, Trump was taking this serious.
Honestly, I do tend to agree with Rob on this. That seemed like kind of like a politician's or a lawyer's answer. Okay, like that sounded like if you're going to put out a corporate press release, was what that sounds more like, more than actual rigor. But we'll see where Rob goes with this.
Is far earlier than even people like Fauci, right? For example, Trump decided, we heard Fauci in February on CNN and other places saying, "Oh, the regular flu is going to be worse." We had prominent Democrats, even after Trump started to talk about potential things we need to do, saying, "There's no problem. Go out to Chinatown and hug a Chinese person." The only thing that Biden suggested that would have been different at the onset of COVID, which is where you're focusing, is he claimed that Trump banning travel from China was xenophobic. That's what he claimed. So how can you claim that Biden would have taken it more seriously when the very first thing he said that would have been different was, "I wouldn't have banned travel from China because I think that has tinges of racism to it."
And we've just banned travel again. Actually, that's
okay. Sorry, I'm just writing all this down. So
that's all right.
If we want to jump into each claim, we can dig through these, but almost all of these are either half true or completely false. So firstly, when we say it's not the policies, it's their guidance, that's not a cop-out. Presidents are like, a president can set a legislative agenda. A president can work with politicians to get things passed. And a president can absolutely set the tone. If you want to get into a side argument for, can a president influence the beliefs of Americans and what they ought to do, and whether or not that becomes down the line instrumental to the types of policies that can pass, I can't imagine that you would seriously argue against that. But I mean, we can have that separate argument if you want. Number one. Number two, Trump was taking this seriously earlier than Fauci. This is just not true. So we can talk about, and Republicans have two talking points to go to. It's the Chinese travel ban and it's the European travel ban. Both of these were done after the WHO declared, a pandemic or declared a problem with China. Trump wasn't ahead on either of these things. If Trump was truly ahead, he would have banned travel from Europe the same day he banned travel from China. He waited over a month.
At this point, now, this is good sleight of hand. At this point, and I don't think Rob picks up on this either. At this point, Destiny does kind of a sleight of hand where he construes the WHO and Fauci as being all one sort of like collective hive mind or something, and like they're just interchangeable. And so that was a very good little intellectual sleight of hand there. And I don't think Rob really picks up on that one.
Month to do it. And in that waiting period, we did nothing. We did nothing to get ready. After we banned travel from China, we knew it was becoming a pandemic around the world, and we sat and waited. And then a month and a half later, like, oh, well, time to ban travel from Europe, when we aren't even fully testing people in the United States because it took us so long to get tests out of the US. We had no idea.
Because we were manufacturing them. I mean, it wasn't like
idea that it was spreading to thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. To say that Trump took it seriously earlier, I mean, like, this is one of those, I'm trying to find a synonym for psychotic. We can all watch the videos. Everybody can go online and Google Trump talking about coronavirus, and we can see when there's like 1 case, 7 cases, like, oh, it's probably going to go away. Oh, there's not going to be many. Like, we all watched him say this. I don't even know if I'm willing to argue on this point. Everybody can go and watch those videos.
Who was saying otherwise? Who was saying otherwise? Was Joe Biden? Was Hillary Clinton? Was Nancy Pelosi?
They weren't president, and they weren't privy to the same types of information that he was. Okay, number one. Okay, and then continuing on.
Good one.
Hold on, wait. Hold on. I'm trying to get through all of it. So,
that, like, I don't agree with it. There's a lot of different ways to go with that, but good persuasion. I got to give another point to Destiny. That's so Rob's got a little bit of a deficit to make up here, but from what I recall, there's some points where we'll see how this all goes.
We heard Fauci say that the regular flu was going to be worse. I I don't understand how simultaneously people will attack Fauci for saying it was going to kill millions and then attack Fauci saying it wasn't going to kill anybody. I'm sure that Fauci has updated his views over time. It seems like generally when Fauci is talking about things, they tend to update as more information comes out. I'm sure that I could find something back in like 2004, but like in late 2019 or early 2020 where Fauci said something that later ended up not necessarily being true. That's fine. That happens as this situation is evolving. Sure. When you talk about how I believe it might have been Pelosi, you didn't say a name, but I think it was Pelosi that said there's no problem, go out to Chinatown and hug a Chinese person. This wasn't because they were saying there was no problem, as you disingenuously implied. It was because people like Trump, and then because of his things about calling it the Chinese virus or the Wuhan virus, because that happened later on in the United States, we saw a small uptick in hate crimes against Chinese people or Asian people in general, because Americans think all people are Chinese. And then we saw people like not going to Chinese restaurants and stuff because somehow this virus was unique to Chinese people. So, and as a response to the attacks that Chinese Americans had to deal with to their businesses and their persons sometimes, I think that's a totally fine statement. And it's not implying there's no problem. It's just saying the virus doesn't originate from Chinese people. Sorry, two more quick things. You said that
and I pointed this out a few times. The Ebola virus is named after a river. So naming viruses after places really isn't an unheard of thing. So now we'll see. Now, the real way to turn this all around is, as this philosopher king right here, Tantui 10 Man says, Phil K.O.E 2024. In 2024, do the right thing. Vote extreme. Vote for the man of the hour, the man with the power, the man that makes the other podcast cower while being way too sweet to be sour. Phil K.O.E. But let's continue, folks.
Claiming that Trump banned travel from China was xenophobic. This is a claim. I think I've heard you even say this before. I always try to look this up. I can never find that. All I find are people saying that calling it the Chinese virus or trying to blame Chinese people on this or using that verbiage was problematic. I don't think I could find things where people are like, oh, we should have never banned travel from China. I didn't see that. Or saying we can't ban travel from China. And then what's further, for further evidence of this, you say if Biden.
And I don't know if Rob finds it, but yeah, Biden did actually say that, actually. But again, it's good base level persuasion where what you want, he's just what he wants to be true. He's just taking as a given and kind of doing a form of question begging in his discussion here. So again, as debate persuasion, it's sublime, but factually, that one's just not correct.
Biden was president or whatever, they wouldn't have done it. The United States just announced a preemptive travel ban on South Africa, plus I think either 6 or 7 other African countries. How can you say they wouldn't have banned travel from China or any other country? Okay.
Well, based on sorry. Getting a source here. So here is the tweet. It's from Joe Biden. It was the day that a day after the travel ban was announced from China. He said, quote, "We're in the midst of a crisis with the coronavirus. We need to lead the way with science, not Donald Trump's record of hysteria, xenophobia, and fear mongering. He's the worst possible person to lead our country through a global health emergency." So when Trump was announcing that he was going to do this ban, Biden almost at the exact same time announces that this is hysteria and xenophobia. Notice he uses the word hysteria as well. Now, you eloquently put it out a bunch of things that you think was bad with Trump. Fine. I could argue whether or not that's not the topic, though. The topic is, what would Biden have done differently? You're just assuming Biden would have done something differently. When I talk about what prominent Democrats were up to, you really have no defense for that. You're just like, well, Nancy Pelosi did say go hug a Chinese person, but that's because there was an uptick of hate crimes because Trump was blaming this on China. That's one thing Trump did better was he blamed China, which we could see that Biden, for some reason, the big guy getting 10%, is hesitant to ever criticize China for COVID, when we know that even if you don't think it came from a lab in China, that certainly China's lies, we now know that they knew that it was spread airborne and that it spread person to person months before they suggested it, which could have been a crucial time if that information would have been made available, that places in Europe and the United States could have prevented travel, which would have helped stop a lot of the initial problems that we saw. And yet,
Bastard. You're not getting your damn ad on my show. You don't even fork up the cash for it.
administration doesn't want to criticize him. And instead, what we see from the Democrats is saying, well, that reeks of xenophobia, and there were upticks of Chinese American hate crimes. That's terrible. There were upticks in these crimes. A lot of them, though, there were an uptick in these crimes that were occurring even before that. And a lot of them weren't from what we would consider traditional Trump voters. In fact, a lot of Nation of Islam type members, there was a lot of anti-Asian hate crimes that were going on in New York. And this wasn't coming from Trump voters necessarily. Secondly, though, the fact that Biden spoke about this potentially being xenophobia, Biden never, no Democrat, you keep saying Trump should have taken this more seriously early. Where were the Democrats doing so? You say Fauci would have changed his mind. On February 15th, 2020, Fauci was going on national TV saying, oh, this isn't going to be a big deal. What did you want Trump to do? You said he had access to better information. If the point person that he's relying on, Dr. Fauci, is going on national television and saying, this isn't a big deal. Look, it was a month later when Trump started issuing these things. So it was a very short turnaround. And to claim, well, that turnaround sent the signal for the whole thing is nonsense. If we want to talk about signaling and like guidance and leadership and that being an important role, again, we don't have any evidence whatsoever that Biden would have done things differently. In fact, we could see once Biden was president, what did he do? He signaled, great, and more people were dead than there were under Trump. So that signaling seems to be very ineffective. And secondly, what would this, let's talk about signaling. We had Biden, Kamala Harris, and other prominent Democrats that seemed to cast doubt on the very vaccine that they're now saying, oh, and I know that people say, oh, they were saying they didn't trust it because they assumed Trump would monkey with it. He would be involved in the FDA. Oh, you mean like Biden was involved in the FDA and two people from the head of the FDA were forced to resign because they didn't agree with Biden's pressure on them when it came to booster shots? So the idea, like, I keep hearing that if Biden would have been there, things would have been different. You've presented no evidence. I've yet to see anyone present evidence. And the proof is in the pudding. What has Biden done? What's Biden's strategy to COVID? Like, you say the president can only do so much. That's not true. There are things that both Biden and Trump didn't do that are disastrous. For example, one of the big things that the United States hasn't done is increased rapid and free testing to almost every person. Why haven't we invested?
That should have been one of the first
all of these emergency bills and decisions. Neither Trump nor Biden correctly invested that in saying, if we could get tests in the hands of people, we could drastically diminish the amount of people that are spreading this virus because they'd be able to test at home. And yet they didn't do. And there's plenty of other things like that that we could see. So the idea that it's just, well, providing guidance. And what exactly was the guidance? After they maligned the vaccine, then they said, oh, we're all in on the vaccine. That's our only strategy. Plus, we think masks, which there's not proof does much, are good. And then Biden, he issues this mask mandate, for federal property. And what's the first thing he does? He goes out to the Capitol building, or maybe it was the Lincoln Memorial, and he takes a picture with his family violating his own order, which we've seen Biden and Democrats and even Republicans.
Now, I'm going to be honest, for finding that little fact about Fauci, I am going to take off the Rob negative point. So I am going to, let's see. All right. Create a banner. All right. Destiny 2. Rob 0 at the moment. Now, this could change at any moment, folks. But at the moment, Destiny 2, Rob O. But this could, card subject to change. Now, I'm going to keep this going.
Do over and over again. So the guidance has been shit all around, and none of the policies that Biden has issued have been any better than anything Trump did. In fact, you can argue that Biden is significantly worse because when he came into office, he should have had a plan. He already had the vaccines that he's relied so heavily on, and yet he's still been an abysmal failure.
Okay, so I can't, when you ask me for like proof that Biden could have done better, you're essentially conceding that Trump was about as bad as you could have been as a president, and then you're telling me to give you like a historical counterfactual of Biden. I can't do that. I can't give you a world where Biden was president. I mean, I can look at how Biden handled things as he came into office. I can look at the difference between how he's treated it publicly, which is very serious, versus Trump, who treated it as a fucking joke publicly, while behind the scenes admitting to people, it was in Woodward's book that he said that it was very serious. You talk about how China could have released this information earlier. Trump knew in February that it was airborne. He knew that it was a serious thing, and he continued to downplay it publicly because he was more worried about his political image than the actual safety of fellow American citizens. I can't sit here and say like, well, if Biden was president, would have done this. I don't know what Biden necessarily would have done as president, but I feel like Democrats in general were
Whoa. Okay, I'm going to write down 24. All right. We're going to go back here a little bit. Remember what he said there about how there's no way that I can tell you what would happen under a
was
Biden
still
presidency.
undiagnosed on a formal level, while Trump was denying that the coronavirus even existed, or that it was even coming,
This
or
is
that it
just a
wasn't going to
little
be a big
earlier.
deal.
Not even
To
10
compare
minutes.
Trump's
Little
lead up
over
to
10
that over
minutes.
and over and over again, and the lackluster pushing of getting, the PPE and everything doled out, to what Biden has done, which has been to take it incredibly seriously. I would take Biden a million times over. If Biden would have been president instead of Trump, we probably would have been in a better position to absorb this virus than how we have now.
What would he have done differently?
Okay. So
Biden could have done better. You're essentially conceding that Trump was about as bad as you could have been as a president, and then you're telling me to give you like a historical counterfactual of Biden. I can't do that. I can't give you a world where Biden was president. I can look at how Biden handled things as he came into office. I can look at the difference between how he's treated it publicly, which is very serious, versus Trump, who treated it as a fucking joke publicly, while behind the scenes admitting to people, it was in Woodward's book that he said that it was very serious. You talk about how China could have released this information earlier. Trump knew in February that it was airborne. He knew that it was a serious thing, and he continued to.
So, folks, you see, not even a little over 10 minutes ago, he said, in a world of Biden's presidency, things would have gone this way. And now he's like, well, I really can't give you a world in which Biden can be president. What are you talking about? Like, who could ever imagine such a thing? And that one, I'm not that, like, I'm sorry for that one, because I can give points and I can take points. This is my show. Sorry. We are going back. We're now at Destiny 1, Rob 0. So this debate can be quite in flux here, folks. So, that's rough. Let's keep going.
To downplay it publicly because he was more worried about his political image than the actual safety of fellow American citizens. I can't sit here and say, like, well, if Biden was president, he would have done this. I don't know what Biden necessarily would have done as president, but I feel like Democrats in general were taking this more seriously from the start than the Republican side of things seem to have been. And I mean, we can see that how that's played out in terms of Republican lawmakers that have gotten sick with the coronavirus versus Democratic ones. We can see this in terms of voters and how they've responded to the situation. You keep saying like, oh, Democrats attacked the coronavirus vaccine. They attacked it. Who's the one not getting vaccinated today? Are you telling me that Republicans ignore Democrats in every single circumstance, except when it came to the vaccine, they listened to some of the early, very, very, very early, like single statements that some people might have said about being like, oh, well, I'll wait until the FDA approves it. Like, come on. This is like, this is insane that this is the one thing that Republicans listen to people on. So I thought we were here to talk about Biden's record. If we want, we can go back into Trump's presidency more. But like, again, this is just like one of those things where like we can all watch the videos.
It is kind of a funny thing whenever you criticize Biden and somebody's going to counter you. The funniest thing you can do is, okay, for extra credit points, have your reply not include the word Trump. And then, oh, you bastard. Because that was going to be all that falls out of their mouth. Trump.
We can spend, if you want, we can bring up like videos and timelines of Trump continuing to downplay what's happening. You can blame this on like one or two statements from Fauci.
This.
But if you want to make the overall argument that Trump was taking this more seriously than Fauci was, like, it's just absolutely not true. Trump is on stage peddling bullshit cures, hydroxychloroquine, which ended up coming out to be harmful and not helpful. We've got like Fauci cautioning people when it comes to things later on. Now, initially, he might have gotten the mask thing not right, but later on, he encouraged people to wear masks and do the social distancing. You've got Trump encouraging people to get vaccinated, getting booed for it at rallies. I mean, again, we can go back and forth on like Trump's handling of this the entire time, but like, I can't tell you like for a fact 100% this is what Biden would have done differently, because neither of us really know the answer to that question.
Okay, so
earlier
I agree, but I'm saying even one of the big talking points as to why to vote against Trump was because of his handling of COVID. And my question always was there going to be a leader that would have handled it better? What would they have hypothetically done differently? And the best, at least you have an argument. Most people don't have an argument. Your argument's like, he would have had guidance. He would have talked differently. I think that would have done nothing. Like just a couple things you mentioned. You mentioned the Woodward book. Dr. Fauci was interviewed.
Excuse me. I'll let this keep going.
After he heard the quotes in the Woodward book, and he said that Trump's comments publicly at the time where he was talking and saying slightly different things to Woodward was
I was
in
just gonna
line
say,
with what medical advisors were
We
suggesting.
still haven't identified America's patient zero, as far as I know, who was the first person in America to have this illness. So we're really still talking about a lot of unknowns, but it is the topic of our day,
To Trump
and it
what
will
to say
capture the
publicly,
imagination.
right? So he was basically being told, don't go freak everyone out horribly at the time. Fauci's admitted, who has no reason to lie for Donald Trump, that, yeah, basically he didn't have a problem with the way Trump was talking publicly about COVID at the time, right? Now, you keep talking about, well, what does this have to do with Trump? I agree. The problem is this. You're going to say, and this is what I thought would happen in this debate. Let me just ask you a question before I continue. Would you say that you thought Trump was a very bad president?
I would say in general, yeah, atrocious.
Okay. So what's going to happen is, I might disagree with that, but the general thesis of this debate of how is Biden's record, how is he doing, you're going to say, well, better than Trump. But even if that's true and you think Trump was terrible, that doesn't mean Biden's doing good, right? If you say this guy was shit, Trump was shit, and Biden's slightly less shit. So we could look, you keep saying we could look at the record. Sure, we could look at the record of what was being said and things like that. Let's look at Biden's record on COVID. How's that looking? Pretty shitty. That's how it's looking.
I mean,
he
Biden
said that he was going to he said he was going to shut down the virus and not the economy. That's not true. That's not what happened. We see all kinds of economic misery, which we'll get to when we get there. More people have died. The only thing that he's basically relied on was a vaccine that he had no hand in even giving lip service to creating. In fact, the opposite. He gave lip service to not trusting the vaccine. And we see, although you're technically right that it seems to be Republicans that are least likely to trust the vaccine, even if you think the vaccine's a good thing, let's not forget when it comes to different demographics, we can see a lot of people such as Black Americans that are distrusting of the vaccine. I wonder why. Why would predominant Democrat groups like Black Americans be distrusting? Could it be because people like Biden and people in his administration have constantly pushed this narrative that it's systemic racism in the U.S. government and the pharmaceutical industry, and I wouldn't trust this vaccine until magically after the election, all of a sudden, now we can trust the vaccine. Now that Biden's here, not only do we trust the vaccine, but we think you should have to take it. But the point is, all of this is a moot point. We don't blame the president for what they're.
That was a weird flip to watch. Like we all lived through it. It was a very strange thing to watch. Just the fucking worm turn entirely. It was but yeah, that is correct.
Followers do. Who gives a shit if it's predominantly Trump supporters doing things you don't like? Biden's the president now. The buck stops with him, and he is shit on COVID. End of story. And I would like to hear you convince people why that's not the case.
So one of the big promises that Biden made was getting, I believe it was like 100 million Americans vaccinated in the first 100 days of his presidency. Didn't he hit that milestone on like day 60? Like, so I would argue in terms of in terms of providing whatever necessary federal support was there to get the vaccine out to the United States citizens, he not only met, but he well exceeded that goal. In terms of, you keep bringing this number up like it's an own over and over again, like the number of people that have died. I mean, like Biden inherited, again, a Democrat inherits a shitty situation from a Republican. I mean, it's not like he can reverse course on everything at that point. The virus is here. It's already in every state and every
That's kind of a weird inference. A worldwide pandemic is somehow like he inherits another shitty like that. That was kind of weird.
Community. I don't know how Biden's supposed to just like turn back time on that. In terms of, there's so many, hold on, Jesus, there's like so much like random shit you bring up. If you want to like dive into one topic, I didn't know that also the coronavirus thing is just one part of the administration. And it like the difference in approach
Kind of an
here.
important one.
If I'm being honest in the debate, I could lie and try to say, oh, well, if Biden would have come and he would have done, I don't know what Biden would have done 100% as a president, but I'm not here to only compare their stance on the coronavirus. I was mainly interested in like major legislative achievements and foreign policy, because it's a little bit easier to compare that on a one-to-one than a coronavirus pandemic that he walked into as it's going on and has already been, in my opinion, botched by the previous leader. But then you're going to say, well, botched how could he have done something differently? And I can give you things maybe he would have done differently, but do either of us truly know that? We're both being demagogues at that point. Honestly, we're being honest with ourselves to say anything other than that. You don't know if Biden, but the reason why I tend to side with the fact that Biden probably would have taken it more seriously is because I think that Biden believed that it was a real issue. The Democrats believe that this is a real bad problem. There were Democrat states like New York that were being severely hampered by it. And it seems like Democrats in general in the United States, the voter base seems to have more aggressive support for measures related to the coronavirus. So that leads me to believe that a Democratic president probably could have handled it a little bit better. It's hard to say, but like when I look at things like, say, the Ebola scare, when there was some French doctor that was flown back, it seemed like Obama took that seriously. And that was like nothing. Like the idea that Ebola was ever going to spread massively in the United States or in Europe is probably not going to happen. It's not the type of virus to do it. But even that, I was hearing.
Yeah, I was actually in. I live in Nebraska, as you can see, and we were all not very happy that Omaha took the Ebola patient, and luckily they kept that person extremely isolated.
Obama take that seriously and was giving public speeches about it, and people seem to be worried about it. When you talk about like Black Americans distrusting, being distrustful of the vaccine, and then you try to pretend that it's because of statements that like Democratic leaders have made. Black people have a lot of reasons for why they may or may not trust different systems in the United States. I could be totally wrong on this, but I seriously doubt that the average Black American is tuning into CNN to get their political discourse for the day, and then they're making decisions on whether or not to trust the medical system based on what they hear on mainstream media news. It probably has more to do with a history of weird, fucky things that have happened to Black people in the United States. Tuskegee is brought up pretty often as an example. I'm willing to bet that combined with socioeconomic conditions, combined with their already adversarial attitude towards the system that is adversarial towards them, is probably going to lead to them to not trust the vaccine or care about it as much as other Americans. I don't know if I'm going to say that I'm going to blame a couple of statements made by Democratic leaders on how African Americans in the United States feel about the vaccine. That seems a little bit silly to me.
Well, if their concerns are valid, why aren't other people's?
But
we'll get
off
COVID. The
sure,
last thing I
okay,
want to say.
go for it.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous on the COVID talk on YouTube.
Yeah.
Oh shit, yeah. Okay, well, I'll just say this. I'll just ask one quick question then. Do you acknowledge that Biden and people in his administration seemed to cast shade on the vaccine before Biden won? And do you think that could have caused people hesitancy?
I think that there were like one or two statements that I want to say it was Kamala Harris said something about, where I don't think they full on said like, I'm not going to trust it, but it was something like it was something that was a little bit irresponsible. I was like, you probably shouldn't have said it that way. But like compared to how much Trump has cast out on everything related to the coronavirus stuff, not even remotely close.
Yeah, but if the big issue is people getting vaccinated or not vaccinated, that specific thing of casting shade, and it wasn't just Biden, it was certainly a lot of his administration and a lot of health experts that they were routinely touting that said it would be impossible. We wouldn't trust this. And Biden made those claims as well. The last thing I'll say is this, right?
Wait, you said Biden made a claim that he wouldn't trust a vaccine?
Yeah, Biden said, I'll try to find the actual quote. Let me see what I can find. Give me a second and I'll find it. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he better be able to back this one up.
Well, shit. Now I'm finding.
Oh, that ain't good. You rotten advertising old bastard. Oh, don't you hate it when that happens? They found just the right spot to put an ad. Because that one, if Rob can actually back that one up, that's the difference between getting a point or not, honestly. Let's see.
But the other thing I want to say as I look for this is you say that actually, Biden did a good job meeting his goal of 1 million a day, and he may have even surpassed that. But the reality is Biden's claim to get 1 million a day was already being met basically by Trump when he left office. So it's hardly an achievement that Biden came in and just continued Trump's plan. This is what Biden said in August 6, 2020. The way Trump talks about the vaccine is not particularly rational. He's talking about being ready. He's going to talk about moving it quicker than scientists think it should move. People don't believe he's telling the truth. Therefore, they aren't certain they're going to take the vaccine. And one more thing, if and when vaccines comes, it's not likely to go through all the tests that need to be done and the trials that are needed to be done.
Who is this a quote from?
Biden.
And
another quote from Biden, September 2nd, 2020. Look.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to have to put a point on the board for Rob on that one. Oh, my God. That was just who said that? Biden. Huh. Yeah, that was all right. We got a tied score. Destiny won, Rob won. Who will be the winner? Who will reign supreme on this show by the King of Extreme?
Look at what's happened. Enormous pressure put in the CDC not to put the detailed guidelines. The enormous pressure being put on the FDA to say they're going, that the following protocol will in fact reduce. It will have a giant impact on COVID. All these things turn out to not be true. And when a president continues to mislead and lie, when we finally do, God willing, get a vaccine, who's going to take the shot? Who's going to take the shot? You're going to be the first one to say, put me, sign me up. Now they say it's okay. I'm not being facetious. Again, Biden.
Oh,
And there's more if you
Sure.
want.
So
I got a whole list of
I
them.
think we're probably on the same PolitiFact article, and I see the
Sure.
I see the first statements that you're not reading. So so in terms of what was said on August 6th, right? Biden said the way that Trump talks about the vaccine is not particularly rational. He's talking about it being ready. He's going to talk about moving it quicker than the scientists think it should be moved. People don't believe that he's telling the truth. Therefore, they're not at all certain that they're going to take the vaccine. And one more thing, if and when the vaccine comes, it's not likely to go through all the tests that need to be done and the trials that are needed to be done. I think that early on, and I would have to go back and dig through quotes again because I wasn't ready for a coronavirus discussion, but Trump did talk a lot about expediting the vaccine. And it seemed like there was a lot of political pressure from him that he wanted to get the vaccine out as quickly as possible. If that is the case, then I could understand people being a little bit nervous about it. And earlier, Kamala Harris seemed to echo as much.
I'm just going to leave that there for a second.
Because the quotes for one of her statements was, if the public health professionals, if Dr. Fauci, if the doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it. So it seems like there was some acknowledgement there. Now, I would actually go a step farther and say
It's amazing. Like the folks who are going to defend Biden, like you got to give them credit on how they're like that was a contortion there. Like I was like, wow, like that, like, oh man.
any type of undermining of the vaccine is probably not a good thing. But I don't think that these were necessarily like the vaccine is bad and horrible, but probably more
That's
to
actually
do with
what it was.
Trump's incredibly obsessive public face of like getting it out as quickly as possible, which I think, I mean, Republicans now are worried about that, right? It's so ironic because when I try to follow down, like, well, who did these arguments end up affecting? If I take you at your word for this
Destiny,
and I ignore anything around the
ways.
quotes, and it seems like Democrats are saying, like, man, the vaccine might be rushed. Man, the vaccine might be not be safe. It seems like it's all done for political reasons. Who are the people that are making these arguments today? It's not Democrats. It's all Republicans. So the idea that you're saying Democrats made these arguments and they were irresponsible, but the only people that echo these arguments are Republicans, seem like they didn't really hit Democrats or weren't a big part of their messaging early on, because all the people that are acting like this and putting these messages out are Republicans that don't want to get vaccinated.
There's very few. There are very few people in leadership in the Republican Party that are suggesting not getting vaccinated. And the other thing is, when you're the only thing you could tout that Biden would do good versus the coronavirus is his guidance, sort of his messaging. And the one issue that he and I would assume you thinks the most important when it comes to vaccine, we could see when it was politically expedient. By the way, Trump was talking about having people be available to have shots by March. That's exactly the timeline that happened. But we had all these leaders, including Biden and other medical professionals, saying it would be impossible to develop a vaccine that quick. That did more harm, even with Trump supporters that still tout to that and say, yeah, even though Trump tells me to get the vaccine, the reality is we had all these professionals saying it would be unsafe to have a brand new type of vaccine like that to come out so quick. And that's one of the big reasons I'm distrusting. Even the Democrats said it.
Yeah, but the Democrats aren't echoing that, right? Like these are Republican talking points. Well, you care because your argument is that Democrats caused harm by undermining the vaccine. Well, okay, did that actually happen? And then when I look at the effect on the public, it doesn't seem that's the case. And when I look at other statements that Biden has made, and I'm sure you see these because it sounds like we're on the same page, Biden literally says, charting a clear path of science-based vaccines free from politics. I get asked the question, if the president announced tomorrow that we have a vaccine, would you take it? And then he says, only if it was completely transparent, that other experts in the country could look at it, and only if we knew all of what went into it. Because so far, nothing he's told us has been true. That seems like a fair statement. I still think maybe you probably shouldn't say that. But like when I look at how this has affected the United States population, if we had a ton of Democrats that were refusing to get vaccinated, I would agree with you. It's like, yeah, that you guys fucked up. You caused a lot of harm. But that doesn't seem to be the case. These are problems on Republican side. So I just categorically reject the idea that these are like harmful statements that Democrats made, because at the end of the day, it had almost no effect on the Democrat public.
It doesn't matter if it had effect. You think that Republicans don't listen to what the Democrats are saying?
No, I don't. Absolutely not. I don't think so.
Sure they do. Go listen to them.
Wait, so
I hope he's just memeing there because, that's just wrong. I mean, we're all social animals. We all watch what each other do. We all watch each other and see what we do. And if we see like a sudden flip like that doesn't go unnoticed by people.
Your argument, I'm just curious on this one. You think that, and I'll even steal it, I won't say this is ridiculous as it sounds. You think that some parts of the reason why Republicans won't get vaccinated is because of statements Kamala Harris and Joe Biden made about the vaccine?
I think it was probably people that were going to be distrusting anyways, but they point as evidence the fact that even Democrats, when it wasn't politically expedient for them, said that there are dangers and it would be impossible to release a vaccine this fast. They point to that and say, see, even they knew. And the reality is, you could say what you want. The guidance was quite simple. We could beat around the bush. We know the truth. What changed when all this, you think all of a sudden Biden was like, and Kamala were like, oh, we have better evidence now that the election's over. Now we think that the vaccines are good. No. You know what happened was they knew that COVID was a big weakness for Trump. And so they downplayed him talking about vaccines and that being a potential thing that could help out because they knew that downplaying would help them in the election. They were willing to sacrifice people if it meant helping them in the election. That's what fucking happened. Me and you both know it.
So you think that, so I'm curious on a counterfactual then here. You think that if Trump's election would have continued on, do you think that Democrats would have been undermining the vaccine and that Republicans would be running out to get vaccinated and the Democratic leadership would say, we don't trust the vaccine?
I don't know if it would have been that severe, but yeah, they would have said that there were decisions being made medically that was being rushed through and Trump was influencing the FDA and other places like that.
Man, that one, I think if the election would have gone the other way, I think the left would have been much more divided on things. There would have been some faction of the left that might have arisen as fairly resistant to such things. But at one point you're starting to play alternate history. No, there we go. That's better.
When in reality, we can see that it's the exact opposite. The only people that we know put pressure on the FDA was the Biden administration, which caused the resignation of two of the top people at the FDA, being so furious that they were being rushed to produce it being okay for these boosters. They thought that was Biden putting pressure on. But if you want to keep going COVID, we can.
Wait, hold on. Which FDA resignations are you talking about?
Let me find them.
Yeah, it doesn't. Because I know there were some FDA resignations, but I thought this had to do with the types of medications that the FDA was approving, specifically over an Alzheimer's drug. To be clear, hold on, real quick. It's unfair that I'm like asking you for the specific thing. I'm not trying to like source you in the middle of the debate, but I do know that there were some FDA resignations that happened because it had to do with an Alzheimer's drug, I believe, that was approved. And the problem that they had was that the Alzheimer's drug didn't show that it was treating Alzheimer's, just that it was treating an underlying condition. I think the accumulation of an amyloid plaque, but that didn't necessarily mean that it was treating the Alzheimer's disease. That was my understanding of it. But there might have been some other resignations. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is from Business Insider. It says, in a letter announcing the resignations obtained by the biotech industry publication Endpoints, Dr. Peter Marks, the director of the FDA Center for Biological Evaluation Research, praised the pair for their work during the COVID pandemic. He didn't give a reason for their departure, but sources told Endpoints and Politico that Gruber and Krauss were upset with Biden administration's booster shot plan. The administration announced last month that most people would be offered a COVID-19 booster shot about 8 months after the vaccination. One former senior FDA leader told Endpoints that Gruber and Krauss were leaving because they felt the Center for Disease Control and Prevention was making vaccine decisions that should have been left to the FDA and were upset with Marks, the leader of their division, for not insisting on the agency's oversight.
Marks.
Okay. All right. Gotcha.
Let's see if we can get.
That's just weird and scary. Why would they do that to us? Okay. If there's an ad, that means something good's coming. I always think that's funny. Like Destiny's very good with where to place his ads. I gotta give the man some credit there.
I want to get to foreign policy. I think a big thing that we could talk about would be economics, though. You kind of mentioned that you thought that the child relief, the tax credit, and things like that. The problem I have is this: like, if you're honest, what did these child tax credits really do? Now, there are problems, and we can get into the specifics of it. But basically, if we're being as generous as possible, you used to get $2,000 for the child tax credit, or what $2,000, and now that number is either, depending on the age of your child, $3,000 or $30,000. Look at the rate of inflation. That still leaves people in a poorer economic decision today than before when Biden took office.
Well, if you compare it to like just the past year, that's possible because things are like obviously historically fucked when it comes to pricing. But assuming that child tax credit stays forward and assuming our economy recovers and prices stabilize, which they will, I don't think you can argue that like a 50% increase in your child tax credit has suddenly been nullified by a 50% increase in the cost of all goods. It's like the CPI hasn't increased that much. I disagree with that.
Okay, but yes, it has. Consumer price index is at a 30-year high. It's at 6 point. Let me get the exact number. This is from October, which is the most recent data we have. The consumer is 6.2% October to October. That's the largest inflation surge that we've had in more than 30 years. And in fact, I believe I read if that trend would continue for 7 years, that would mean every 7 years,
40%, depending on where you live.
Yeah, if it increases at that rate for 7 years, but like we have worldwide inflation at the moment. To try to blame this on some particular thing or to try to
Okay. Worldwide inflation at the moment in a world based on our petrodollar, A. B, in a world based on the trading and commodity of oil. So worldwide inflation is still a bad thing, and we're still the world leader of it. And if we're doing more than anybody, then that's still bad. And that's a negative for the whole world, actually, and it's stealing from the poorest people in all the world. So inflation is a very insidious tax on the poor. So this one I'm interested
say that we
to see where it
expect that
goes.
to continue at that rate. I don't know why, but I guess, well, I do know why, but people always do this when we're experiencing like these historically great or historically horrible economic events. People will say things like, if this happens for 5 more years, then this will happen. Or I saw people do this with, and it's unrelated to Jeff Bezos, where the Amazon stock jumped a ton like one day. And people were like, if this continues for the next year, Jeff Bezos will be worth over $100 trillion. I was like, why are we going off of one? Like, we're in a historic period in terms of like supply chain crunch, in terms of probably some true inflation. The idea that it's going to continue at this rate for the next 7 years is a pretty big claim. I don't think any major economist is making.
I wonder what it is, because like lefties hate the notion of any inflation being real under a Democrat president. Destiny's not the first person I've heard this from, and I've heard some pretty wacky shit like, what inflation? I don't use the price of goods to measure inflation. I use and I've heard people say, I use inflation to measure inflation. It's like, what in the fuck are you talking about? And he says, some real inflation. It's like, yeah, like it's pretty basic. If you have more of something when there wasn't before, you've inflated it. I mean, you've inflated its value. I mean, it's pretty simple stuff. But I don't know what, like, it seems to be like a knock to the leftist ego to admit that a Democratic president has initiated some form or figure of inflation, because I think that was like the big thing that like the libertarian Ron Paul style Republicans would like rally against the leftists back in the day, and they're like, shit, I don't really know how to counter that. And now they're like, I'm ready for these inflation arguments. Oh wait, shit, all right. I mean, so it just seems to be this weird like personal knock whenever there's an inflation argument, and it's I don't know why leftists just recoil at the very thought or notion, and like their delicate humors get so, and their vapors are just so aflutter that if you even imply that a Democratic president would even think, would even have the idea, would dare even have the thought of inflation, I don't even know what to say to you, sir or madam. We continue.
Okay, so that's why I wanted to start with COVID, because again, if we're comparing Biden to the previous administration, because you could say, well, this is a crazy time. The things are different, so it's hard to look at historic things when we're talking about a pandemic that's affecting so many things. Okay, that could be true. So let's look at what the situation was before COVID hit for Trump compared to what we have for Biden if things get rosy and the pandemic goes. Even then, we could see that the economy was humming along under Trump. One of the only reasons that Trump, in fact, let's be honest, Trump was not a likable guy to the people that he needed to vote for him. Obviously, his base likes him, whatever. But he needed independents or people that were sort of in the center to vote for him. The only way he was going to get that, because of his foibles personality-wise, was the economy.
Foibles.
The economy was kicking ass.
I like that
right?
word.
Then COVID comes. And yet, this isn't the benefit of the doubt we give Trump. We don't say, well, a historic, pandemic, you can't really blame Trump for the economic fallout. We say, nope. The buck stops with him. So given that, you say, well, this is only inflation for a year. Yep. And that's how long Biden's been in office.
To be clear, if I'm and I don't believe I said this ever in this debate. And if I've ever said this, wow, this was really stupid of me to say. I hope I've never said this. I wouldn't blame the economy during the coronavirus pandemic under Trump as being horrible. I'm not going to say like, wow, Trump, you really fucked up the economy there. And I'll be fair, a lot of Democrats did say stupid shit like that. Like, oh, look at this last year under Trump how the economy. Yeah, no fucking shit. It was a fucking pandemic. The economy was humming along under Trump. Like you said before, though, if we're going to say that like, well, all the shots are being delivered before Biden stepped into office, the economy was humming along before Trump stepped into office. But I mean, yeah, he relatively didn't fuck with things, and he seemed to just let
the market
go
turned
as it did,
around
and the
with a
economy
lot more
continued to move. The world economy continued to move, and for the most part, I think it did.
The economy
pretty
is
well.
a psychological
for the most part, yeah. But my chief criticism isn't going to be the economy. My chief criticism is going to be what are the interventions that the president made into the economy. Now, when I take a look at something like the coronavirus relief, or we can get into like the infrastructure bill, and then I compare that to Trump's targeting of like tax cuts, it feels like Biden is taking a more bottom-up approach versus Trump taking a more top-down approach in terms of their stimulus or their infusion of cash into the economy. And I tend to prefer Biden's approach there to Trump's.
Okay, that could be in a hypothetical sense of, what your ideology says is how you want to approach the economy. But the reality is the decisions that Biden made.
It's always funny when folks on the left, like, they've all hypnotized themselves to believe that the Democrats aren't in bed with their own class of very wealthy donors as well. It's just there's certain donors that favor Republicans or certain donors that favor Democrats. That's really about it. And so it's this is a bottom up approach. And like you act like there's not so many dirty fingers in the till of this thing. Like, I mean, that's just the way that any bill that comes out of Washington nowadays, if there's $1 that helps anybody, there's at least $2 that's going to somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody.
Made certainly didn't stymie inflation, and all of the plans you're talking about, things like the child credit or the infrastructure bill and all of that. One of the big reasons we have inflation is the massive amount of spending. Now, not all. Let me, Steelman.
Actually, Retro God says liberals and Democrats are different, and some of the Democrats are no, and that's why I said folks on the left, because that kind of that's about as broad of an umbrella as I think I can really put out. So you have a general idea of because like even if you're not a Democrat, you do understand if you're somewhere on the left that the Democrats at least closer to your goals than the Republicans anyways. And if you're like if you're basically any shape or figure of capitalist, even if you're not a Republican, you do kind of understand that the Republican Party is at least closer to your goals than a Democrat. So it's not like what I put it as the difference is it's kind of like you're living in a mud hut and you'd like to get to a stone hut. You're not living in a palatial, 10-bedroom mansion, but you're at least moving up and you're at least advancing a little bit. Retro says, I hate parties, but I love people. That's really the way you got to do it. It's very strange when I'm on these Twitch panels. I get the feeling that there's a couple people I've run into that if there was some button they could hit and it would just make their political opposition just vaporize, they would break their finger hitting that button. And it's very concerning. Well, me, like when I'm on a panel, I would rather just, or even here in the chat, I would rather just whatever trials and tribulations in your own life you're going through, I'd rather them just turn out the best possible way they possibly could for you. And like, life's a weird journey, and just get the most out of it as you can and enjoy what you can and get to know some interesting people along the way. But that's a pretty good philosophy you got there, Retro. But I was just kind of making the point of if you're any kind of flavor or figure of socialist or on the left or of any kind, you're probably going to be a little close to the Democrats. And I've had like my grandpa, and my great grandfather especially. He was an Irish, or not Irish. My great grandfather was a very, very dedicated FDR style Democrat who was a Greek immigrant, and so there's I do understand, like, the good people are all over the place. It's really the parties and the people who run it that are kind of fucked. And whenever I talk about like the left or talk about the broad spectrum of the right, what I'm talking about is, and when I'm speaking ill of it, I'm usually talking about the political leadership. Because let's be frank, like Retro or anybody who, even like Mr. Saxakete, let's be frank, you and I got way more in common than anybody that's in goddamn Washington, D.C. Third party that loves. That would be kind of cool. But the problem is third party is just a spoiler. Now, welcome. Come on in, folks. Welcome one and all to the K.O.E Nation, and God bless every last one of you beautiful people here this evening. And right now we are doing a scorecard of the Destiny Rob debate. Right now it is tied. Rob started off with a negative point because he was... he got a little dirty when he said the polls don't lie. It's like, sorry, Rob, I got to take a point off. And then Destiny also lost a point a little later, but it was necessary. But right now, so for a while, it was Destiny 2, Rob -1, but Rob has crawled back from the precipice. And now we've got ourselves a real match here. And welcome, hey Girly Bear, how we doing? And we got Retro Hate versus, it was something I was kind of chuckling with myself because I was on my way today. I went to Omaha to get a Lego model for my nephew Oliver. He's battling pediatric cancer, and I wanted him to get something. I wanted to get him something special. So I went to this place called Bricks and Minifigures in Omaha, where they've got all these special sets, and I got him this. Really neat Lego rocket model that he doesn't have, because everybody's trying to help him out as much as they can. They give him every Lego set that's currently in manufacture. So I had to go somewhere that I could get a retired set, and he's going to flip out when he sees it. But on the way there, I was thinking to myself, the anarcho-capitalists and the anarcho-communists are kind of like the Hatfields and McCoys of far extreme fringe politics. It's just like they're kind of this eternal, they're always there. It's like the Jedi and Sith. They're always there. You really can't do anything about them. And they're always just kind of doing their nerd lightsaber war off to the side. And right now, the anarcho-communists are starting to find a little breeding ground here on Twitch, and just fascinating to watch. But yeah, like hate versus hate, which side? Both sides have their own like weird, like super fringe, and it's always fascinating for me to watch. I was just kind of chuckling to myself about, when you said that, it was like hate versus hate, which side? It's like, yeah, it's like the anarcho-communists and the anarcho-capitalists. They're like the Hatfields and McCoys of just classic political nerdery. I don't know how else to put it. I fucking love it. But welcome all y'all folks, and we're going to get deeper into this because I want there to be a final score, because I think this one's going to be pretty interesting, and it's going to be a lot closer than anybody wants to admit.
Not all of this spending was done under Biden. Some was under Trump, right? But with the lockdown / spending that we saw, it was one of the largest transfers of wealth that we've seen from poor and working class to the wealthy. Now, I blame Republicans, Trump, but certainly you blame Joe Biden for this as well. And Biden's going on an even more insane spending spree. And what's even crazier is when you're spending trillions of dollars to the tune that Biden is, you would expect that would stave off short-term economic problems.
Oh, we're
right?
well aware.
Like if you made me
I wouldn't know,
president... Well, if you were president and you were like, I'm just going to spend $30 trillion today, that would probably do a lot to buttress people's bank accounts if you divvied it out in a certain way.
Oh, well, sure. But it did. It did, yeah.
Well, and it's still bad. It did, and it's still bad. That's the point I'm making.
What do you mean what's bad when you say that? Can you just be a little bit more precise? Yeah. When you say it's bad.
What's bad?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, like people's like the cost of living for people. There are people that were paycheck to paycheck are worse off now. There are people that are having to sell their houses that wouldn't have otherwise. There's people that can't afford to pay rent. This is despite the fact that they're getting all of these extra monies that caused all of this inflation. So it didn't help out in the short term, and in the long term, now we're seeing inflation. So when you say, well, people have an extra $1,600 in their pocket if they have a child, well, there's problems with that. First, that extra $1,600 probably doesn't meet the cost of inflation that we've had year over year from last October to this October. So whatever you think about Biden's plans, if we say we give him credit for the child tax credit, why wouldn't we also give him credit for the inflation and the supply crunch and the energy crunch and all of those sorts of things?
Shit, hold on. I gotta... Fuck, Brittany, why are you fucking with the camera?
That's all him.
Oh man, that was kind of brutal there. I'll be honest there. Oof, oof. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I never thought I'd see it. I really didn't, but Rob pulled ahead. That one was just even Destiny's like, fuck, what? Why did you? God damn it. Like that one was, yeah, holy hell, folks. We got ourselves a match here. Destiny, Rob, and also Retro's got a comment. The Christians, they are sleeping, but if they wake up, they are powerful. Oh, we know. Oh, we know. If you trade money in the church, whips. Oh, I I I advocate for no such things, but it's fascinating. I have been to some of those really evangelical mega churches before, and there's times when I'm like, you can't help but get the slight feeling that they're kind of missing the point. Like, I'm sorry, I can't help it. Like, when it's been a while since I went there, but like me and an ex were trying to find churches, and so we went to these uh like they weren't like pass around the snakes places, but like they were like they wish they were Joel Austin type churches, and there were people that would like speak the tongues and stuff, and like I have no, if that's how you go about your faith, have at it, have at it. Like when I was a kid, I was raised that wasn't something you're supposed to do. So first time I saw that, I was like, what's happening? So yeah, but yeah, if I were to see a snake in church, I'd be like, all right, peace, y'all have a good one. But yeah, I can't help but kind of get the feeling they lose the point. But now, all right, back. Retro, you bird walked me. Well done, well done. But no, I was just talking about like the super mega ones where they're like the collection buckets go around like 5 times. That felt kind of wrong to me. But we continue.
I paid her off.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. So stepping back a little bit, like, is there inflation? Yes, there is. Is it because of a lot of stimulus? I don't think that American stimulus has caused worldwide inflation. I think that there are a lot of reasons. Well, not a lot of reasons. I mean, primarily because of things stemming from the coronavirus. There are supply chain crunches that are driving up the cost of a lot of things in the United States and across the entire world.
Now, granted, like all of this is a little bit of Sunday morning or Monday morning quarterbacking, because like at the time the future was uncertain and outcomes were frail. So when Trump started dropping stimulus, I mean, we didn't have we didn't have any levers to pull. Retro goes, I saw a pastor in a mega church selling deodorant, said it had a new advertising. He sprayed and sniffed the spray, and he said it's oh no. That is kind of tacky. But I don't know. Like, yeah, for each church has got their own thing that they got going, so it's always interesting to see how every church operates, because I just jumped from church to church for a while. But there was some that left a bad taste in my mouth. Okay, like I did not. I didn't like my trip there, but some were really good. So it really just depended. But alrighty, we continue.
World right now. The idea that the like sorry. So cost of living is increasing for sure. I don't know what influence the president can wield over that, especially when things related to the cost of living might be like, for instance, like cost of housing or like cost of food, stuff that would show up on the CPI. When all of this stuff is increasing worldwide, I don't know. I'm just not entirely sure what the president can do to alleviate that, other than giving stimulus to people. We talk about like people living paycheck to paycheck. I don't know how we can say that they were worse off when there were people on unemployment insurance because of the boost that were getting more than they were even getting at their job. I don't know which of these people are worse off. And then in terms of people that can't afford to pay rent is increasing in a lot of large cities, but this is a problem that has continued to happen probably for the last 20 years. I don't know what the president can do to exert influence over housing prices, unless we're going to say he should take a Bernie plan or AOC plan and go like world or nationwide rent control or something. I don't see these as being areas that the president could intervene in. Now, as I said before, to start this, I'm not necessarily looking at the president for the economy. I'm looking at the interventions that they make in the economy. If Biden hadn't had done any of these things, hadn't provided any stimulus, the cost of living would still be increasing. People would still be living paycheck to paycheck, and rents would still be increasing as well. These have all been trends that have been happening for decades at this point. There would still be a worldwide supply crunch. It's not like people would be better off if there was less stimulus. If anything, there would be even more problems. So in that case, I would consider that to be a positive intervention, even if inflation is happening at the moment.
Okay, so, but this would only make sense because you're saying, well, you can't blame Biden for the historic inflation here in the United States because it's happening worldwide, right? So if you say, but we do give credit to Biden because he can't control that inflation for having.
And I'm back. Oh, that's better. And we got Big Buckin' Entertainment here on Twitch. How are we doing this evening, Big Buckin' Entertainment? Big Bucket Entertainment says, listening to each of these two talk about logistics and supply is horribly frustrating to me. Both are barely scratching the surface on that issue alone. Yeah, and this is a really surface level understanding of inflation and commodities as well. But we will see how much deeper this goes.
Interventions, but that only works if those numbers worldwide are similar to the United States. And what you can see is from statista.com, right? You could see inflation 2018, this is year-to-year inflation rate. 2018, 3.5%, 2019, 3.4%. This is worldwide, by the way. 2020, 3.2%, 2021, 3.5%. So it's around 3% every year. Inflation's up like 0.2% compared to year over end than what we would expect. And yet we have historic 6.8 inflation when it comes to consumer prices. So we can see that the policies that Biden's issued, the United States policies have doubled the inflation from what we're seeing on the app.
Nobody likes to admit it, but an economy can even sustain 5% inflation. Like, it's one of those nobody likes to. It's usually a sign of bad things to come, but you can sustain 5. Anything over that, though, you're fucking pushing things.
Average in the rest of the world.
Wait,
Also,
hold on real quick. When we say average in the rest of the world.
You know good, rotten, dirty rats. Thank God this didn't happen when I was stepping outside. They would have got a whole ad in on my show. Nice try. I mean, hey, I support capitalism, but a little of that has to go to your king of extreme. Retro says inflation inspires less faith in the currency. Absolutely correct. And even if you think it's a small thing, like you said, our whole currency now is just based on faith. What are the dead presidents worth? Yeah, that's kind of it. Like, now I say it's the petrodollar, which is more or less held up by our Navy and our military. So
I
that's
don't
really
care about
the value of the dollar.
I care about the average of like the OECD, right? I don't know how much inflation like countries in Africa or in southern.
Now, this is something that's kind of fascinating, and this also happened. Like, I don't care about the rate of this. I care about that. Like, whenever a number looks bad, like whenever numbers look bad for Obama, this was also kind of a thing that I always saw. Like, well, I don't care about those numbers. Let's look at these numbers. And like, I remember like, oh God, everybody's flipping out about the labor force participation rate. And then they wanted to go by some other metric. It's just something fascinating to see. Big Buckin' Entertainment says, you need to review Trump's interview on Mark Levin aired tonight. Left me wanting more. I'd love to, but I'm sure platforming the former president would probably get me kicked off of fucking YouTube or Twitch. So, what is fucking reality these days?
Like South America or whatever. I don't know what type of inflation or supply chain things. Like, I'm just not as. I'd be more concerned with comparisons to other OECD countries, because there are countries that are ahead of us in inflation. So like Brazil and Turkey are, but then there are other countries that are like kind of comparable in terms of what the US is experiencing inflation. So I'm seeing like New Zealand, Spain, Poland, Russia, South Korea, Mexico. Now the US is definitely sitting on the higher point of this, but like these are all countries that have experienced a lot of inflation as well. But then if you go down, there are some countries that are like experiencing like deflation. Argentina is a big one. China, Indonesia, India, Costa Rica, the Netherlands, Japan. So if you're going to average all of them out, I don't really know like what that tells us. Right. I'm looking at a Pew Research article, and it says that the U.S. is the 8th highest annual inflation rate for the third quarter of 2021. But I don't think that we're like doubling the rest of the world. I think that there's a lot of different countries experiencing inflation for worldwide reasons, but they probably experience it a bit in different ways.
Well, that could be true, right? But even still, the data worldwide on the average is going to matter because there are other things that we'd be able to look at. Like, for example, we could say, well, the US has high inflation and so does the UK. I don't know. I have that data in front of me, right? But even if that was the case, it could be because the UK's had very similar policies than Joe Biden, right? And it could be countries that had these more lockdown mandated oriented countries or decisions had higher inflation. That would still be reason to blame Joe Biden for the inflation just because Japan did it and the UK did it and Australia did it too. It doesn't matter that the decisions of Joe Biden didn't directly lead to this.
Yeah, but when I look at
consumer inflation,
yeah, go ahead.
That's just
I mean, it is kind of, you know, if your friends were all gonna jump off a bridge, would you go do it too? Like, you know, it's like, yeah, because there might be a few countries that don't actually run the world finances might have a bit of deflation. Like Japan's been kind of an economic problem since the 90s. It's just a conundrum now.
Consumer inflation, right? When we look at producer inflation, it's even worse, right? So producer inflation is at the highest that we've seen year to year, which is 8.6% in October. That ties it for the highest we've ever seen since recorded history. Now, the reality is you could say, well, this was inevitable, but that's not what the Biden administration was telling us. They were telling us inflation, no, it's not going to be that bad. It'll be fine. It's not going to be that bad. Then they said, well, it's temporary. It's just a little bit of temporary inflation. And now they're saying, well, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe we need to live more like Europe. Maybe a little inflation's a good thing. And while this is occurring, we can see that large conglomerates and banks like BlackRock are buying up a bunch of real estate that the average person's no longer able to afford. So this sort of stuff, like it's incredible that like all of a sudden the buck stops here. Doesn't matter when it comes to economic policy, when we can see, regardless of how you put it, the average person in this country by far is worse off economically right now at about a year into Joe Biden's presidency than they were before it. So, that's the truth.
Yeah. So when we look at that list of countries, like this is the reason I'm having a hard time saying like stimulus is causing this. So Japan, my understanding is Japan gave more stimulus than any other country in the world. They're experiencing deflation. So it doesn't seem like stimulus alone is explaining all the inflation that's happening in the United States. And then we keep throwing a lot of other things here. When we say like it's not a bad thing, I don't know any Democratic leaders that are saying that like, oh yeah, 5% inflation, quarter after quarter after quarter is okay. I don't think any Democratic leader wants that. But then also again, and you know, we can talk about like the buck stops here or whatever. Like inflation is the purview of the central.
That's the thing. Like Destiny, I think, is making kind of the mistake of assuming that the Democratic leaders would even understand, like many of them would even understand why that would be a good or a bad thing. Political power, once attained, is used to never having to actually be questioned, and its every request is seen as an order, and competence has little to do with it. And so, I mean, like to me, it's like the fact that they would have any idea why that'd be a good or bad thing. I mean, there's many leaders in politics that just see is this the button I hit to make more money fall out of the sky? Yeah, political power is used to not being challenged much.
Or the U.S. Federal Reserve. You know, the U.S. Federal Reserve sets its targets. It's hard to tell how much inflation right now is real versus transitory.
Biden just appointed Powell, I think. So if you're saying if he wanted to combat inflation, he had a chance, and he went with pretty much more of the same.
Yeah, how much it's going to go away. Like it might be the case that we're experiencing massive inflation and it continues to happen, and it absolutely is a problem. It might be a case that we are super crunched right now in supply lines all over the world, and it ends up not being as much of a problem in a year or two or three. Or maybe the consumption around the world is increasing so much that it will continue to be a problem. But I don't know if I would say that like in a time when the entire world is experiencing so much inflation, and in a time where there were countries that did more stimulus than us, like Japan, who aren't experiencing inflation or experiencing deflation, it just seems really hard to say the stimulus in the United States is the primary driver of inflation. I think the most I was able to find, because everybody's obviously curious, well, what's causing it? I think I read like a Wall Street Journal article that said that there might have been some small contribution there, but I don't think any economists are saying like, oh yeah, it was the U.S. stimulus that definitely is causing inflation in the United States. Like it still seems to be that people universally believe that it is a massive supply chain crunch, and hopefully as that resolves itself over time, we would expect to see this fall.
Okay, but again, I'm not saying it's purely the stimulus. I'm saying it is it's a conglomerate of all of the decisions that we've seen our leaders, particularly Joe Biden and the Democrats that have been in charge in all of that, House, Senate, and presidency. They own this, right? And when you say it's
well,
just,
like what decisions?
Look,
What do you mean by that? Yeah.
Well, there's all sorts, right? Like, for example, decisions that come to energy, right? Stopping and leading guidance to lower the domestic production of fossil fuels, which required us to import more from overseas. There are decisions they made on lockdowns and things like that that help lead to the supply chain crunch. All of these things, in addition to the mass amounts of spending we're seeing, is what's going to cause inflation. And I think that if you really think about this, right, the idea that you're saying, well, look, we can't take the world average amount of inflation, right? Because they could be that some countries are really high and some are really low. Well, but that seems to be a cop-out because your entire argument that's kind of saying we don't blame the Biden administration for this inflation is, well, it's like this around the world. Well, that's not true. Now, the world is facing similar problems. They're facing a pandemic. They're facing supply chain crunches and other things like that. And yet they don't have near on average the inflation we see. You cite one country, you say Japan. Okay, but maybe Japan had other policies that buttress them more against the sort of inflation that we see with the Biden administration. I don't know how you could look at the United States being so far above average in poor economic performance and say, well, we can't blame Biden for any of that, but we could give him credit for interventions, but we can't look at the rest of the world on average. It just doesn't make sense. Like, the Biden administration and the Democrats own this.
I mean, we can say that, but I don't think anybody agrees with that. I just don't think that's true. If you look at all the countries and you look at how they've doled out stimulus, now if you want to talk about other policies that could be used to buttress against this type of inflation,
almost
then,
gave
we can talk about those potential
other
policies. But like when we look at the amount of stimulus given in different countries, so particularly there's a thread that I'm familiar with where people are talking about like the average budget deficit to look at deficit spending during these things, and then you try to draw like a line to see how many of these countries experienced inflation. There just doesn't seem to be a strong trend there. It seems to be other things that are unrelated to the amount of stimulus or spending that countries did. Now, if you want to talk about, again, and I'll say again, if you want to talk about like other policies, that's fine. You mentioned like stopping domestic production of fossil fuels. So my understanding is, I think that they said that we're not allowed to drill on like some federally owned lands, but I don't think the majority of our fracking or the majority of the refining or the oil production in the United States happens on those lands. I don't think that was a huge like driver I'm pretty sure we're still like the largest fossil fuel producer, I think, in the world at this point. I don't know if halting production on federal lands, if anything, if you wanted to argue, that seems like a virtue signal to me more than anything. Kind of like when you talk about doing things for federal prisons, and that's 10% of the prison population. I don't think it was a big deal. When you talk about how lockdowns are leading to local supply chain crunches, I don't know if the United States has locked down anything. People are still going to work. People are masking up or getting vaccinated or whatever. But I don't know if the United States is like uniquely locked down when it comes to our supply chain stuff. It seems like other countries were way more insane about, like, I say insane, but we're way more strict when it came to locking down their production related stuff.
So then let's just say hypothetically, then why do you think the United States is doing so much worse than all of these other countries when it comes to our economic standing?
Oh man. This gets really complicated because I think that the arguments between economists, and I'm not ready for this debate, the arguments between economists are, how do we measure inflation? And I'm sure if you've read about this, you've heard of this. Some people will fight over whether or not the CPI versus the PPP versus other types of measures or indexes are more appropriate when it comes to measuring inflation. I don't know if going by, because the CPI is generally what people cite, consumer price index, but other people will argue that like the types of goods that are included or aren't included aren't as relevant today when that index was created. So we shouldn't even be using this as an index for inflation. That's one potential. Maybe we don't index it correctly. Maybe there are better ways to do it. A second possible example is the idea that maybe in the United States, maybe shipping things from overseas is a unique problem that the US has that makes it harder for us to get goods. I don't know if shipping overseas is necessarily as big a deal for European countries as it is for the United States. If we're getting stuff from other countries, a lot of it has to be shipped. Obviously not NAFTA or whatever the new US, Mexico, Canada agreement should is called, USMCA. Obviously not from those two countries, but if we're shipping stuff from China, right? Supply line issues related to cost of fuel or like backups in harbors or stuff related to shipping things overseas is probably going to be way more relevant when it comes to backing up US production than it would be for other countries that might be able to use other modes of transportation or get more of their supplies, say, from the European market, which is the largest unified market in the world. Now, I don't know 100% if that is the case, but I mean, off the top of my head, I could think of some things that would probably be more relevant than US stimulus spending, which Republicans infinitely say is a huge driver of inflation that never has been.
Spending money, increasing the money supply at the rate that we've been doing this quickly is certainly going to predictably lead to inflation. Just one thing, we can move on to the next topic.
Yeah.
One thing, like my final point in this, just
it is. Sorry, it just is. Rob's just correct on that one there.
something little that I wanted to correct. I don't know if this is true. I wasn't prepared for this, so I just DuckDuckGo this. This was the first thing that comes up from the Washington Post. It says 42% of coal, 24% of crude oil, and 13% of natural gas came from public lands in 2017. So the ban on drilling and things like that from public lands seems like it would have a major glut in our fossil fuel production, which would be one of the reasons that we went from a net exporter to Joe Biden, who supposedly is pushing Green New Deal type stuff, begging OPEC to increase production. We're now again reliant, again, in one short year. We've gone from being a net exporter, which, by the way, was one of the greatest thorns in the side of enemies we have, like Russia, the fact that we got into that market and was the biggest exporter in the world. Now we are someone that's begging foreign producers that we've had all of these problems with to increase production.
So firstly, the prohibition was on new drilling. So that doesn't stop our current extraction of oil from places in the United States. I don't know how many new drilling sites, I'll be honest.
Yeah, that was pretty brutal there, Rob. I'm sorry. And also, Destiny, you're just wrong there because eventually wells do run out. So if you're going to stop new wells from being drilled, you are actually undermining the overall production of oil because wells do not spring eternal. So, oh man, Rob clawing himself back from the precipice, but there's still a lot of fight to go here, folks.
Honest, you said that you weren't prepared for this. I'm not necessarily either. I don't know how many new drilling sites were picked out that people really wanted to go into in the United States. In terms of like whether we're like have become a net exporter or not net exporter, like just because we export a lot of fossil fuel, and I would have to read up on the specifics of this. Like we still import fossil fuels as well. Like there's like refinery processes that you do where you might export certain petroleum products. You might import crude oil for different reasons, even if we are a net exporter of other petroleum products. Yeah, the idea that
pretty much
I don't know what the point of that is. If you're trying to say that like the United States like has like ceased production of petroleum, or has our production even fallen?
I believe so. I'm not going to bullshit you, though. I don't have the data in front of me. But my understanding, if the production hasn't followed and we went, it just seems to logically make sense. If production has remained consistent and we went from someone that was net exporting and making a large amount of money doing it to now we're begging OPEC to increase their production, that doesn't seem to make sense unless our production's fallen.
Or our consumption could be increased, right? Consumption of oil goods all across the entire world has increased as well. It does seem like our production has dipped for sure.
That would be because you're not making new wells. How are we doing there? Grow the Farm Up. Grow the Farm Up says Destiny using 50 words when one will do. Logistics equals spot market inflation. Yeah. Like I say, Destiny's kind of a walking thesaurus, and Rob's doing a lot better than I thought he would here.
From 2020 onwards. But I'm not 100% sure like exactly why. I can't really say.
Okay. All right. So we might as well do the last thing I had domestically. We could do it real quick. It's just the crisis at the border. No matter how you look at this, if you are for more immigrants or not, I think illegal immigration is bad. If you wanted those illegals to be made legal, there would be a process that Joe Biden would have been able to do that. But because of his disastrous policies and his guidance and what him and the Democrats and his administration suggested, we now have one of the big issues that he said it was a human rights abuse to have kids in cages. At one point, we had 4 times more kids in cages under the Biden administration, and we're seeing record border crossings across the southern border.
Grow the Farm Up says, take the analogy one step further. If we just stop building cars, eventually we're going to run out of cars. Yeah. Now, that would be an example of argumentum ad absurdum.
Every month. Another undisputed disaster from the Biden administration.
So when we talk about like record numbers of kids in cages, like these are loaded terms. I don't think the problem was like kids in detainment centers. I think the issue was families being separated at the border. That's the thing that was a problem. Now, there were times in the past where people were being critical of Biden and say, oh, well, look, like you've got more families, you've got more children and different detainment centers and whatnot. But that was a fundamentally different issue than with the problem under Trump that people were complaining about, where families were being separated at the border and and we're essentially, that was the huge problem there. In terms of like,
I just real quick, I fundamentally disagree. I do think that they were making that second issue, saying that the separating of families was uniquely bad. Again, it's hard to blame Trump for that because it had to do with the decision that came out of the most liberal district. But regardless, they were obviously also pissed about the fact that there were kids in cages. And the comments of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden talking about kids in cages being a human rights abuse would never happen under our administration. I'm sorry, I don't buy, we're talking about different types of kids. Fuck these kids. 4 times more in cages? Oh, well, screw them. We were talking about different types of kids. No. They said kids being detained was horrible, and then the amount that were detained under Biden increased fourfold.
I mean, like if the only critique is that like kids in I don't know what kids in cages mean. Like, are we talking about like just children being detained? Because I mean, like you have to detain people that are trying to cross the border. I don't know how I'm supposed to argue that that's a failure of the Biden administration. Should they just be let in? Should they just be turned around? Or I mean, like obviously you have to.
And I think this is where Destiny starts to play pretend a little bit. Like he plays pretend a little bit, and he kind of plays dumb a little bit. Let's be frank. Grow the farm up. So now just putting whole families in cages somehow is now somehow, but this is not a good, like it's a humanitarian crisis, no matter how you want to look at it. And so
detain people that are trying to enter the country. I mean, that's going to be an unavoidable process of managing the border. I don't know if I would see this as a giant failure on the Biden administration.
But we shouldn't use me and your stand. I agree with you, right? The correct answer when people were criticizing Trump with kids in cages is it's very complicated. So the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said you can't detain children with adults, right? Because obviously bad things could happen. And so the implication was, well, what do? Just leave the kids go themselves? If a dad comes across the border with a child and you have to detain the father, what are you going to do? Send the child himself? Or are you just not going to detain anyone that comes with a kid? Well, that doesn't seem feasible. So you're thinking through this rationally. That was the answer. But it's not my standard or your standard that matters.
Apparently.
It's Biden's standard. It's Kamala Harris's standard. They said it was a human rights abuse and it wouldn't be done under him. And the Democrats and the media went fucking nuts on this issue. They said Trump was an inhuman monster because these kids were caged. And then all of a sudden, once it's the Biden administration and it turns off, signaling to the rest of the world, if you come here, it's not a crime to cross illegally and you'll get a bunch of free shit. Well, that led to people sending their kids by themselves. What are you going to do? Leave the kids in? No, they have to be detained. But these people, including Biden and Harris, said that it was a human rights abuse. And so it just goes to show that not only one is this a crisis and just the sheer amount of people that are crossing, but second, the same people that virtue signaled about being so upset about kids in cages, they never gave a shit. They didn't care at all. They just saw it as a political issue to hammer Trump with. They didn't care about the kids.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to necessarily disagree with that in terms of like the average messaging on almost everything related to immigration tends to be really stupid. I don't disagree with you there, but I mean, like there were Democrats critical of Biden's treatment of this, even post Biden getting into office. I remember that people were complaining about certain centers that children were being held in and that the standards went up to par on them. But even when you looked into those, I'm pretty sure that these centers that the children were moved to were ran by different departments that had more humane conditions than some of what was photographed at the border under Trump. Now, I mean, we can argue that maybe this isn't necessarily Trump's fault, or maybe they had good reason to separate, like children from their families. I have a hard time believing this because I'm pretty sure the federal government right now is paying restitution to those families that were separated. So it seems hard to believe that it's still happening and they're paying restitution at the same time. I guess maybe that's possible. It doesn't seem very likely to me that is happening. And then in terms of there being more border crossings, I mean, historically, Democrats have been a bit nicer when it comes to immigration. And I'm pretty sure historically, there are more people that are trying to cross the border under Democrats. I think if you look at Democrat versus Republican.
And looks like, hey, we got Girl the Farm Up says, can we just get some friggin' plywood to the border patrol? Get rid of the photo op a chain link fence. Okay. And we got Bandit. How we doing there? Hey there, Bandit 848. How we doing there? Welcome. We're just doing some debate analysis tonight. I figured it would just be a nice, chill little chat for this evening as we go over this debate. And as you can see, I'm scoring it right now. Destiny's got 1 point. At one point, he had 2 points, but then I had to take a point away. At one point, Rob was sitting at 0 points and then even a negative point. And he has crawled himself back from the precipice. Now, we'll see how this ends. There's still, as my brothers like to say, there's still a lot of football to go yet.
Republican candidate or presidencies, and then you look at the border crossings, they always tend to increase under Democratic presidents. It's just something that happens. But
yeah, but I mean, again, even if it happens historically, that's not a reason to say that this is a success for Biden. And again, I understand. there are issues that me and Destiny are arguing about, like how much immigration do we want? We're not going to get into that debate. The point I'm trying to make, even if you think we should have more immigration, you should prefer legal immigration. And Biden would have had the opportunity, as we've seen with Obama, to make a lot of executive decisions that would allow certain classifieds of people to be legal immigrants. But instead, we have record illegal immigration.
So in this case, okay, sorry, I've lost the plot.
If you're trying to lose belly fat, stop doing cardio. This sounds backwards, right? Well, believe it or not, it's actually true.
Cardio actually burns calories, usually in the form of carbs in the bloodstream that are then replaced with the very next meal that you eat and stored as more fat. This is why when you even eat low-calorie foods or run for an hour a day, it seems like you get softer, but you don't actually lose any weight. And this is one of the biggest reasons why most weight loss
Son of a biscuit
within the first
you rotten ad bastards.
But now I understand. I wouldn't argue that Biden has been successful in immigration. Those are the points that I originally brought up. But on the flip side, I don't know if I would argue that Biden has been unsuccessful in immigration. So you bring up a really good point that if he wanted to, Biden could have flexed some executive authority in order to help people that were immigrants. So I think that he's tried to do that by rescinding some of what was done to DACA, or at the very least, it's being challenged in the courts. Trump's attempted of revoking some of the protected status to the DACA people. But I mean, something that we saw between Obama and Trump is Obama seemed to be frustrated that he couldn't get, I forget the name of the Immigration Act passed in Congress. So he started to do some things via executive authority, and Trump rolled on and he tried to undo those things via executive authority. I know that a lot of Democrats are attacking Biden for his mentality of working together. But I actually greatly approve of Biden attempting to get more comprehensive legislation passed through Congress rather than trying to do everything via executive order, because that just doesn't work out. Legislation is much harder to undo. We saw that under the Trump administration. Getting rid of the ACA was unsuccessful versus just attacking executive orders with new presidents. So in terms of, like, you're saying Biden has the authority to do a bunch of stuff via executive order. Yeah, sure, he could. But why would you do that when your whole point as president is saying, like, I'm here to work together. I'm trying to pass stuff in a bipartisan manner. And I don't want to just flex a bunch of executive authority that can be undone with the next president. I think that's a good thing to do.
I don't disagree with you on that. In that we should, I think the executive power, both with Trump, with Biden, with Bush, all of them, we have way too much executive power. And I agree that legislative branches are there to legislate. However, the point that I'm trying to make here is, regardless, the decisions that Biden has made has led to record illegal immigration crossings that are occurring. And that's a disaster. And it's leading to real harms like sex trafficking, fentanyl crossing the border, all sorts of things that are benefiting the cartel, including 4 times more kids in cages. And I'm just trying to make the point that even if you're on the left, because certainly I don't have to sell it to my audience, I don't have to sell it to conservatives. They're like, yeah, that fucking sucks.
Yeah,
I'm making the point that even on the left it sucks.
I'm going to ask you this question. I have to run and let Melina in real quick, so I'm going to give you a chance to research it real quick. So what decision did Biden make, or his administration make, that led to, like, increased illegal border crossings? Was this actually like a Biden decision, or is it just more people tend to do this when there's a Democratic president office? And then I'll be right back in 1 second.
I'll answer when he comes back. Meanwhile, I could grandstand. Aren't I kicking ass? I'm doing better than that guy that was dressed as corn.
I can't wait to watch this on 2 times speed. I'm definitely going to do that.
Yeah,
I can go faster if you want. So I could, like, this is the answer.
doing a lot
The
better
problem
than
is that what we
actual
see is that
Jack.
there were a bunch of people like Biden and Kamala Harris, and even every Democrat that was on the stage that raised their hand and said that they didn't think it should be a crime to cross illegally. When you do that, and in addition, you said that we should give free education and healthcare to these people, of course you're going to send the signal to the rest of the world that they're going to come to get all these things. So I can't talk fast. I can talk faster if I want. It has to do with policy debate. It's policy debate in college. You have to talk really fast. It's fucking stupid. It ruined me for life because it makes me talk fast.
I thought it was like panels that ruin you because you're trying to get in as much as you can while you have your floor.
That's true too. But no, I think it's going to get. Look, here's the thing. I like debating someone like Destiny because even though I think I'm confident in all my positions, like, I'm just setting up in these positions. I think when it comes to COVID, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to fuel and supply crisis, I think Biden's been a disaster. But I like debating someone that's actually intelligent and can push back.
Okay.
All right, but I can answer if you like.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to do. So, like, you should know the answer to this because you said that on COVID, the important thing is guidance and things like that. And although I have questions on how much that would be true when we're talking about these specific decisions under COVID, certainly a lot of that is the signal to people that are illegally crossing. So, for example, when we saw every Democrat on the debate stage, when they were asked, raise your hand if you think crossing the border should be a criminal offense if you do so illegally, and no one raised their hand. And then we saw people like Biden and a bunch of other Democrats, almost all of them, say we should give health care to these people. We should give education opportunities to these people. It's no surprise when they ask these caravans that are coming, why are you coming? They say, Biden. We thought Trump would send us back, and we think Biden will take us in. And so even if he has the policy to say, no, we can't take you in, he signaled to the rest of the world, along with the Democratic Party, that we would be willing to accept illegals. We don't think it's a crime. You'll still be allowed to come in. You'll still be given out these benefits. And would me or you blame people for taking that deal? Of course not. So it was the guidance that Biden and the Democratic Party offered. That's why there is historic numbers of people crossing the border.
Okay. And I think I said as much earlier when I said that under Democratic presidents, there tends to be more, my understanding is there tends to be more border crossings, or at least attempted border crossings. But it seems like you have to concede that if the messaging from the administration is going to cause very real on the ground things to happen insofar as illegal border crossings are concerned, we must have to make the same concession for Republican leadership and messaging during the coronavirus.
Well, but there were, the difference is this, right? Think about it this way.
That was a good one. That was a good one. Credit where it belongs. Even if you don't agree, it's good persuasion. So Destiny 2, Rob 3, Destiny ticks back up.
There are ideas of the messaging can do when it comes to the people we're talking about. So you're right that the leadership and the messaging when it comes to individual wearing a mask or individual choosing to get a vaccine, yes, that messaging and stuff could matter. I argue that the Democrats weren't any better on that until they found it to be politically expedient once they won the election. But nonetheless, I will concede that on that particular issue, you could be right. However, unlike with this illegal immigration stuff with COVID, there are actual policies that could have been done through Biden using executive privilege, or it could have been through him using his position as the executive to force sort of compromises and things like that legislatively, such as increased testing, increased mononucleotides, other things like that, that would have been beneficial instead of just saying, we're going with mandates and the vaccine. When it comes to illegal immigration, what we're talking about is, why are these people coming? Now, one of the things, and I'm sure you know this, Destiny, that progressives complain about is Biden's sending a lot of people back. He's sending a lot of people back. Mm-hmm. Well, the best thing to do would be to stop the incentive for people to come in the first place. And that's the problem. The messaging led to that incentive, and those people are coming. And then it's a horrible situation. Like, I don't want these people to have a shitty time either. But what do? Do you just let everyone in? Do you detain everyone? Do you send everyone back? You've made the decision impossible because of the signaling that you did to the rest of the world. That's what Biden did, and that's what the Democrats did when it comes to immigration.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree, but I mean, all they can do is enforce the rules at the border, turn it back, or catch them if they try to cross illegally. And then I guess hopefully in the future, try to do some sort of comprehensive immigration reform. But I mean, like right now, that's obviously not the main ticket on the agenda. I don't know if I would expect Democrats to change their entire messaging because of a few more, or because of a substantial increase in illegal border crossings, when it's just not something that can be part of their legislative agenda right now because they don't have the votes for it or they don't have the political capital for it. But
if you wanted some actual comprehensive immigration reform that would actually solve the border crisis and this humanitarian issue, you'd have quite a few Republicans if we could just make it so that we can at least know who the fuck's coming across. There's ways you can do that. Interesting.
I wouldn't write when I'm talking about wins or losses of the current administration. I don't think I'm considering immigration here. This has been untouched at this point. But again, we're year one into the presidency too.
But again, I'm just saying it's a disaster. All the things we've talked about.
When we say disaster, it's what do we mean by disaster? I don't think that
it's way worse. It's way worse than it has been.
Rob has been way too over reliant on that word tonight. It's been a disaster. This is a disaster. That's a disaster. It's all been a disaster. And way too reliant on that, I'm afraid.
In a long, long time.
Okay. I mean, there are more attempted crossings and turned back, but I mean, I guess I could see that. I don't think that it's a big thing in the average American mind. I don't think it's a huge detriment to the country. It's definitely probably, I'm pretty sure it's worse than it was under Trump, but yeah, okay. Okay.
And that's the
Trump won an election in 2016 and got 77 million votes
than they were before Biden took office. And you're like, well, we can't really blame Biden for all of that. But again, I guess we'll leave it to people to decide. I'm cool with moving on to foreign policy if you want. Talk about Afghanistan.
Yep.
Okay, so with Afghanistan, so you listed three things. The first was sort of COVID relief, which we talked about. Afghanistan was the second thing. Mm-hmm. So on that, right, you say it was bold of Biden to pull out. Totally agree 100%. I applaud Biden for pulling out. I don't have a problem with Biden pulling out. I have a problem with the way that he pulled out. He pulled out like an amateur. We were sold that he was this 47-year politician. He had the chops to do foreign policy. He was a vice president. He was terrible. And he lied to the American people, and he lied to the world community, and didn't even stay in contact with our allies, so much so that he got censured in the UK by parliamentarians and MPs that were furious with the fact that he let them holding the bag as well. What this guy did is this, right? He said that we should close down Bagram Air Base. He told the American people that the troops that we had there and the training that we had from the Afghan security forces would be enough to, which, by the way, they were 2-1 outnumbering the Taliban and had superior firepower, etc. He said that they would be able to hold for a long time. And instead, what he did was within 3 days, we were overran. He relied on the Taliban for defense, the same Taliban that released ISIS from the prison in Bagram Air Base that then bombed our troops. Every step of the way, Biden's decision on how, not pulling out, but how he pulled out, was a disaster that showed our allies and enemies that we have no idea as a country what we're doing militaristically.
So a lot of this is kind of vague, and I can't really think. When you say we pulled out like an amateur, I mean, we had to get our forces out, and we did that. That was the goal, and that is what we did. I don't know what part of this is like an amateur. You mentioned saying that he believed that the ANI would be able to hold for a long time. I mean,
that was our goal, and that is what we did.
He said that.
Again, this does sound like
the president is not going to say, just letting you
release.
guys know, ANI is fucked. As soon as we leave, that shit is going to collapse. Of course, he's not going to say that in a country that we've been trying to nation build for what, the better part of 2 decades. I don't see him ever making that statement publicly, regardless of what they
If Rob calls him on it, he gets a point.
thought behind the scenes. I think most people knew that the ANI was going to fall to the Taliban. Maybe not in 3 days. Maybe they thought it would be 3 months. But like, I don't think there was very much faith left in that government to be able to hold its own, regardless of troop numbers, for a variety of reasons. I mean, we already had an agreement in place with the Doha Agreement in terms of us having to pull out. And if not, the Taliban would begin to escalate attacks. It's hard to run counterfactuals, but I mean, if we stay longer and the Taliban begins to increase their attacks, like then what? Now this is why I have so much respect for Biden pulling out the way that he did, despite the fact that it was a little bit messy. Let's say that we run it. Let's say that we say, okay, we're just going to draw down numbers a little bit. Right. Well, let's say that you draw down those numbers and the Taliban that you've negotiated with say, hey, you're not pulling your part of the agreement. Fuck you. And now we start getting attacked. Let's say that we have one bad attack on U.S. troops there. And let's say hypothetically 100 U.S. troops die. OK, if that happens, do we know what comes next? 2 words. It's a troop surge. Abso-fucking-lutely. You're going to see headlines every day, Taliban killing American troops. ISIS is going to be thrown in there because it's all Middle Easterns are the same to the United States. We're going to have another troop surge in Afghanistan, and we're going to be there for another fucking decade. Abso-fucking-lutely. It sucks what had to happen, but I truly don't believe there was any other way that the president could have pulled out. We couldn't have done a slow drawdown over time. We couldn't have secretly told people, by the way, we're pulling out, because obviously that would have shown an undermining of the ANI. It would have shown that we didn't have any confidence in them, which we probably didn't, but you can't publicly show that. I don't see there being any other way that we could have left Afghanistan other than to just pull out and say, oh, good luck, sink or swim.
No, I totally disagree. And let me explain why. First,
or ANA, sorry.
Yeah, I knew exactly what you meant. I'm not like some of these leftists you debate that will jump on that. I'm not wearing corn today either. Anyways, you said, of course, he said that, right? Well, just to go back to our COVID discussion briefly. Yeah, I actually defended Biden on that, right? Of course, you're going to, as the leader, sound optimistic. Same's true of Trump with COVID. Which is why when Woodward came out with his quotes, you had Fauci say, actually, the way Trump was talking was in line with what we were advising him to say, because you don't want a leader to come out and say, we're fucked. That's it. Right. So just that quick point on there. But
Yep. Oh my, this is getting saucy tonight, folks. So Rob with a big pull ahead. 4-2 Destiny right now. But if I recall, Destiny gets a big fucking wallop right coming up here before too terribly long. With that one,
when you talk about your hypothetical, first off, I'm not talking about
gotta
saying,
give
like,
it that point landed.
You know, I'm Monday morning quarterbacking and picking out little things. They could have did this and this. It's real simple. You have certain
that's what Twitch
assets
was
in
for.
a country. You have our weapons and things like that. You have the people that use those weapons, the military. Their job is to defend the people that we have there that are American citizens or that are our allies. And then they're to train the security forces, right? You don't bring back the people tasked with defending before the people that need defended. You don't bring them back before you bring the military equipment back. Bagram Air Base was so much more secure that it would have been the optimal place to evacuate all Americans, all people. I forget what the actual designation is, but maybe you remember what it was. But the people that we considered of special status because they helped our military as translators and things like that. Because it turns out all of these people that we evacuated from Afghanistan, only a very small amount of them were actually the people that allied with us in that way, that had that special designation. So the best way to get all those people out would have been to hold Bagram Base.
Guys, ladies love men who smell like men, not like high school boys.
Okay, nice try, Ad. Nice try. God. Well, it's starting to get heated, so of course there's going to be some advertisement. There we go. All right. All right. Worry not. Worry not. I can't remember. I think they're going to get into it, but yeah, Bandit, that look on Destiny's face, the minute he made that comparison, like, fuck. And like, I'm sure he's going to have some sort of addressing to it, but if you accept one, you have to accept the other. It's unfortunate. Nice.
And then finally bring back the military people. Instead, we did it in the opposite way. And here's your hypothetical. You're like, I concede that if there was a bad attack, that it would have been really. So the best way to get all those people out would have been to hold Bagram Base, get everyone out, then bring back the military equipment that we could, and then finally bring back the military people. Instead, we did it in the opposite way. And here's your hypothetical. You're like, I concede that if there was a bad attack, that it would have been really bad and it could have led to a troop surge. But that's non-unique anyways, because we had to trust the Taliban. The Biden administration trusted the Taliban in order to get us out.
Now, I'm afraid I have to, I'm not trying to be biased here at all, but I have to give Rob another point here because, he's asked, how could it have been done any better? And Rob just breaks down point by point by point how it could have been done in a better, safer, more efficient way. I got to give him that.
So the Taliban acting is the
Still
way
some
they
football
did
to play here,
well,
folks.
they could have decided to be more insane and just attack us for whatever reason, when in reality, they just wanted us out. Seems like nonsense. In fact, discussions with the Taliban that we've now seen showed that the Taliban was totally like, listen, if you want to have control around the airbase there, I forget the name of the city where they were withdrawing from Afghanistan. They said, that's fine. Go ahead. The U.S. could have defense. The U.S. said, no, we'll rely on the Taliban for security. Right. So the argument is, yes, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback, but I'm saying something real specific. You don't bring out the defenders before the people you're defending. And the results are evident for everyone to see. We could have pulled out in a similar time frame if we would have kept Bagram Air Base and then pulled out of it last. Instead, we allowed ISIS troops to be freed. We allowed the most secure air base to be overran. We allowed billions of dollars of technology and weapons to be given to who we are told are bloodthirsty heathens that are going to butcher women and children around the area. Now we've just created one of the largest air forces in the world, and it's bloodthirsty maniacs that we were told we had to fight for 20 years.
So in terms of the COVID discussion, I wouldn't compare the reason why I was irritated with Trump's public positions on the coronavirus stuff wasn't because he was trying to not cause a panic or sound good. It was
he couldn't let that one go. He couldn't. It's like, no, there has to be a way that one is valid and the other isn't. It can't just oh man, it's interesting to watch. Cognitive dissonance hits everybody. I mean, it hits me. It hits everybody. Nobody's immune from it, but it's fascinating to watch it happen to somebody else in real time.
is because there wasn't anything being done in the background. If you wanted a totally different discussion on the coronavirus stuff, it actually wouldn't have been Trump saying there's no problem. If Trump was saying, listen, guys, there's no problem, it won't be a deal, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But in the background, they were they were working hardcore on getting mass testing out, which the United States lagged on. They were working hardcore on getting PPE out, making sure that there wasn't a shortage of ventilators, hospital beds, whatever the states needed. If that coordination was happening behind the scenes in a massive level, while Trump was saying publicly, hey guys, it won't be a big deal, blah, 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 I would probably be a little bit warmer to Trump taking that stance. Whether or not Biden is saying there is going to be a peaceful pullout and nothing bad will happen or not, isn't really going to make a difference in our pullout. If anything, him doing the other type of messaging and undermining the ANA might even look worse on the world stage. But it's not like in the background, like Biden could have done something better to improve the way that we pulled out of that country. If you talk
Rob
about how
just broke it down,
and again, I think a lot of people are. Well,
I'm sorry, but Rob just broke down point by point how it could have been done better. You can't just say that. I don't know how that could have happened when Rob just literally like walked you through it. I mean, like that's. I feel like that's not being generous to your debate partner and just generally not good manners.
Tough situation to be in, and maybe if we try to play hindsight, maybe we can say there's something different, but I don't even think so. We talk about like bringing back military equipment. Like, what are we supposed to do? Are we telling the ANA like, okay, listen guys, we're going to be honest with you. You guys are dog shit. You're not going to be able to hold this shit. We're jacking everything. We're taking it all back. Good luck. Imagine if we did that. Well, now Rob Noerr would be arguing with Destiny saying, this is a catastrophic failure. The United States stole all the equipment. We spent 20 years training the ANA. Now we took all of our equipment back. How are they supposed to defend themselves against?
You can always throw out someone's analysis if it relies on mind reading. This is mind reading into an alternate history or an alternate reality or an alternate timeline. So keep in mind what you are actually listening to is Destiny's imagination.
Against the Taliban. This was horrible. Now the bloodthirsty Taliban own the entire country because we disarmed the people that were supposed to defend the Afghanistani government. They can't do it, right? That would have been the exact conversation. 100% that we'd be having right now. You have to leave.
So that, like, it was good up until that last part. It was a really good argument up until that last part, but we'll see how he finishes it.
Them with the equipment that they have. You have to leave with the stuff that we've armed them with. And all you can really do is hope for the best. If it's your country, you want to defend it, then good luck. But you can't, we're not going to sit here and steal everything. Same thing with this idea of like, well, we should have evacuated all the translators, all the visa holders, everybody first. Like, again, you can do that. But like, what does it look like again on the world stage, or even more specifically to the ANA? We're like, okay, you guys are cool. You got this. All right, guys, you need to get the fuck out of here. We need to get all the visa holders, all the SBIs, everybody has to get the fuck. Okay, no. You guys have it. I'm sure. Get the fuck on the plane because this shit is going to fucking go down in 3 fucking days, guys, right? It's again, and I am acknowledging that it sucks and it's shit, but this was one of those hard things that had to happen. I don't think there was ever going to be a better way that we could have pulled out of Afghanistan, because every other circumstance involves so many other situations that could go horribly wrong. And then on the latter point that you say, and I actually have a big issue with this, people like to describe the Taliban as insane or bloodthirsty or blah, blah, blah. They're not insane. They have their goals. Sure. When you talk about relying on them for security, we're going to be honest. The Taliban wanted the United States out of there. Okay. For whatever we want to say, policy failures, whatever, the United States.
Now, I disagreed with a lot of what he said there, but it was incredibly well crafted and good persuasion there. I disagreed with the substance, but the form, I have to give credit. So we're kicking up Destiny 3, Rob 5. So Destiny's now back in because it's one of those, like, there was always going to be some bad negative fallout. Now, Rob actually did break down the best possible way to do it. That's why he's pulled so far ahead. But Destiny was able to at least keep himself in the game with that reply, because he knew he couldn't just say, Rob, you're right. You're just right. I'm just shit. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, because that would have been pretty much it.
The States kills a lot of motherfuckers. We can go over there and fuck shit up. The Taliban ddid not want another U.S. troop surge. There is a reason why they didn't take advantage of our hasty retreat to try to blow up Americans or attack people, or why ISIS was the one that did it and not the Taliban. Because the Taliban was like, hey, you guys want to leave? Yeah, we'll fucking cover your shit. Get the fuck out. We're actually totally fucking happy for you guys to get the fuck out. I think in that case, the Taliban was probably the best force in the entire fucking planet to secure the U.S. retreat, because nobody wanted us out of that country more than the fucking Taliban did.
Hey,
so I don't think that relying on them for security, even if there was a this happened with the ISIS attack. I don't think that was the worst thing in the world. We both have a similar objective there, which is to have the United States pull out of the area. In terms of creating the largest air force in the world, or not the largest one, but a huge air force with a lot of technology that we left to the Taliban. Yeah, you know what? We did it in Iraq with ISIS as well. These were wars that were started 2 decades ago. Like, what the fuck can you do? All I can say is thank fucking God that Biden got out. It sucked, and he had to eat shit for it a little bit. I think we might have even argued about this before, though, and I think I even said on the political level, this probably won't matter in a few months, even though this was making headlines for like a week. And I think for the most part, I don't think people are going to remember this come election time. We don't talk about it much anymore, but we'll see. So yeah, it sucked. It was hard, but anybody.
Oh boy, Destiny, you've spent too much time out of red state America, I'm afraid. If you think that that's not going to be forgotten come the next midterms, let alone for the next generation, boy, howdy. The Freak says, hey, yo, Freak is on.
Trying to armchair that it could have gone different ways isn't thinking about like, well, what would that have looked like? What other external situations could that have caused? And I think we got out about as cleanly and efficiently as we could have.
But see, you contradict yourself, because the second point you make there, I'll respond to it first, where you say, well, the Taliban wanted us out so we could rely on them for security. But earlier in your previous answer, you said, well, if we would have took our time longer, what would we have done if the Taliban would have bombed us? Well, the reality is they wouldn't have. They just said, okay, good, just get out of here. If that means you're going to take 30 more days, fine. So, like, I don't understand your previous hypothetical, because it seems that we would have known, and by we, I mean the Biden administration would have known, the Taliban wants us out, and as long as we meet some sort of time frame, they're going to say, okay, just get the fuck out. Like, that seems to be buttressed by the fact that we now know that the Taliban was like, how do you want to do this? You guys want to run security? You want us to do it? Like, they weren't like being super picky, like, no, we were in charge. Right? Well, now, we do know that they did free the ISIS prisoners that ended up attacking us. And whether it be through corruption or incompetence, they allowed that attack to occur on U.S. troops. But the bigger point to your first point, and I've heard this argument over and over, where it's like, well, what were we...
The Freaks go, hope you're not ending soon. It has been a while. Oh, no. I'm just taking this opportunity to have a nice little chat with the K.O.E Nation this evening. And we're going over this debate. And I'm also, as you can see, scoring it, actually. Whenever there's a big, I'm scoring it kind of like an MMA or a boxing match. But I'm just assuming one big, long, continuous round. Because it's... and I'm just scoring the big haymaker hits, really. And this one is interesting because for a while at the beginning, Destiny was dominating. Rob was -1 point for a while. And he didn't put any score on the board for a good long while. And Destiny was ahead by 2. And then, as you can see, things turned around. Then Destiny lost a point for contradicting himself pretty hard earlier. And Rob finally gained his point back. And now, as we can see, he is really putting some points on the board here. And this is quite the evening to Freak. Quite the evening.
Supposed to do, send the signal to the ANA or whatever that that we were pulling out, and then that would have discouraged them. And then, so okay, what would the end consequence of that been? Oh my God, if we discourage the ANA, the Afghan security forces, whatever they're called,
there's plenty of
they might have been
play,
overwhelmed
folks.
in say 3 days. Whoops, that's exactly what happened.
But we wouldn't.
But now, and
yeah, sorry.
Why? But that's on the Biden administration. They should have known. It is on the Biden administration that they should have had an accurate assessment, at least very close, at how likely the ANA was to succeed. You even admitted everybody knew they were going to lose. They knew it. The ANA knew it. The president of Afghanistan knew it. Biden knew it. So why would you make the decision to arm the very people that we've been at war at for 20 years? Because you say, well, we don't want to slightly demoralize the ANA. So we have to keep Americans there. We have to close down Bagram Air Base. We can't bring back our allies because we don't want to demoralize the group that we think is going to be fucked in 2 weeks anyways. That makes no sense. And as bad of a situation it is that the Taliban could have overran, say, in 2 days instead of 3 days, it's infinitely better than arming them to the teeth in the way we did, than stranding Americans, than stranding our allies, right? So there is an easy way. If we wouldn't have gotten rid of Bagram Air Base, all of this could have been accomplished without any of the negatives. Now, obviously any random thing could happen. We would have dealt with that if it occurred. But clearly the best strategy would have been to keep Bagram Air Base, to pull out the people we were defending, to pull out our allies, to pull out our equipment, and then to pull out our troops. That was the order we should have done it. We didn't. And if you say, well, that's just because Biden didn't know. Well, that's on Biden too. That's on Biden and his generals as well then. If they didn't know that the ANA was going to collapse in such a quick time, and so that's why they decided to leave these weapons there and to leave Bagram Air Base, that's on them.
So, okay, so first
He's
of all, when you're
right.
saying like the Taliban wanted us out in one,
pretty much
instance,
resumming
but
an
wouldn't want
earlier
us another,
argument, but he's
because,
right.
Yeah, because if we would draw down troops and have some extended presence there, then it is likely that eventually the Taliban would escalate against us because it would be in violation of the agreement that we made to leave. As part of the Doha agreement was that we were going to leave completely Afghanistan, not that we were going to draw down troops to 2,500 soldiers, but that we were going to completely extradite ourselves from that area. So if we try to maintain some extended presence, at some point the Taliban might be like, okay, well, fuck it, we're going to start bombing you guys, right? We don't know if that would have been the case if we would have done a drawdown, if it would have taken longer, right? Maybe they wouldn't have. Maybe they would have been okay with an extended stay. I don't know why they would have negotiated a prior agreement contradicting that. When you say that we've been at war with them and we don't want to arm them,
Interesting.
With all due respect to the Afghanistan people, we're not really at war with the Taliban. They do their things over there. Them in Pakistan can have fun and do their stuff. But the only reason that we have so much protracted conflict with the Taliban is because of our presence in Afghanistan. If we leave. Now, part of the Doha agreement was, now will they honor it? It's hard to say, but part of that agreement was that you are not going to allow these lands to be used to attack. I believe it was the U.S. and I think the Gulf states were specified as well.
Hey, Lesto, how we doing? Hey, I'm just here reviewing a debate and just having a nice little Sunday evening chat with all y'all. How you doing this evening? Oh, looks like, you're not under the weather, are you? I certainly hope not. Certainly hope not. Hey, certainly understandable, Alesto. Been working, I totally get it. And God bless you. We need a few more folk like you in this world.
Well, I think that agreement was negotiated in Qatar, but that was part of the agreement, is that you're not going to do terrorist attacks or any of that shit against us. Like you guys, so essentially it's like, you guys stay over here, you do your fucking shit, whatever the fuck, we're going to go over here, we're going to do our shit, and we're going to be done. The idea that we're like in this this long convoluted war with the Taliban, technically, hopefully, they just their country. They take over Afghanistan and then they leave and then we're gone. We're out of there. We shouldn't have any extended conflict with the Taliban. They're not like ISIS, who are trying to do shit all over the world and are hijacking our weapons to do whatever. This idea that we would just I can't, it's hard to even engage seriously. This idea that we would just start taking all of our shit back from the ANA and then loading it up on a plane and be like, good luck. I mean, like we just can't do that. We can't do that. It's just
it's one of the basic things in the art of war is you take your implements of war with you or you break them so they can't be used against you. I should know, I just did a full audiobook reading of The Art of War, actually.
It's unthinkable that the entire world would sit and watch the United States completely disarm Afghanistan, the Afghanistan National Army, and then just walk away, because even if the exact same result would have played out, well, now the United States would have been blamed for it. Now the U.S., now everybody been looking at the U.S., and as I just said before my fake rant, everybody say, oh, well, of course the ANA fell to the Taliban army. Like, you guys took all of the weapons from them. Like, yeah.
But no one suggests, like, the weapons, for example, a lot of the stuff that was...
I just dropped in my chat the link to my Art of War audiobook reading in case. There it is on YouTube and on Twitch. But Alesto TV says, Destiny doesn't understand that when we leave stuff, we destroy it. Yes, that's like the whole Bagram Air Base left in total working order. Yeah, I totally get that. And I like also what DeFreak said. There's a reason the Muppet Afghan president bailed immediately. No one can trust Joe Biden, period. So, yeah, you never know. The Russians might need it later. Well, I figured the Chinese, like if there was any like computer coding problem, the Chinese would probably give them backdoor coding in exchange for all that mineral rights. So, it's I figured that wasn't going to be much of a big problem. But yeah, I actually did an audiobook reading of the book The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and that's kind of a big thing. You destroy your implements of war if you are going to have to leave them. Oh God. Oh Lord. What
Left
world?
was equipment that the security forces didn't know how to use, like Apache helicopters and things like that, right? That's the sort of stuff that we left. Like, no one's saying that, like, you take every pistol, every bullet. And keep in mind, they were
you leave the
so
small
far
ones.
out-armed and outnumbering the Taliban that no one would have looked at it like a slap in the face if we said, sure, we're leaving you with, M16s or whatever the traditional munitions that, we would give to a security force like that is, but we're taking the heavy equipment. No one would have looked at that as like, well, that's it, they're doomed then. They have to leave the Apaches that they don't know how to operate. And the other thing, like, it's just real simple. Like, regardless of how we splice it, there are predictable things that we could have done, including keeping Bagram Air Base. You say the Doha Agreement. We already failed to meet some of the Doha Agreement's deadlines, which was fine. But the problem would be, like, again, we're still saying that Biden had this choice. People are saying, well, what would have happened then is that we would have never fully pulled all troops out. Who's suggesting that? We're looking at Biden's success as a president. Biden could have had a simple plan that said, look, we're going to take 30 days to get everything out. We're going to get the Americans back. We're going to get our allies back. We're going to take the heavy equipment back. And the best way to do that is to keep Bagram Air Base, which the Taliban has basically said, that's fine. You can do that. And then we could have taken, instead of rushing to get out in like 2 weeks where we couldn't vet people, we could have taken a full month. We could have made sure the people we wanted got out first. We could have made sure that the most expensive equipment got out first. And all I'm saying is we can splice this any way we want. I'm for the pullout. I'm just against how it was done.
Yeah, I guess like
it was.
No, you don't, you rotten ad bastards. God, doesn't that just piss you off just a little bit? Doesn't that just? And Destiny's gonna like, all right, I'm about to hit him with the bleh.
Real quick, I'll finish. The reality is it was a disaster. Our allies thought it was a disaster, and it probably goes a long way to emboldening our enemies like Russia that's now advancing towards the Ukraine and like China that's now advancing towards Taiwan because they think that we're inept because with vast superior arms, with far more soldiers, we got our ass kicked in 3 days because of the leadership of our military and the Biden administration.
I don't agree with any of this. We're like this emboldening our enemies has been like a talking point for perpetual and infinity wars that we've been doing since for how fucking long, since fucking Vietnam. This idea that like, oh, we have to stay, we can't embolden our enemy, we can never retreat, we can never run. Like making the intelligent decision to pull out, which you already said you agreed with, is good. The idea that like a vastly superior army kicked our army's ass didn't get kicked. We pieced the fuck out. We got out. We left. Our army didn't get their ass kicked. The ANA,
we left our people.
The last I checked, I think there were like 24 Americans left in Afghanistan. I'm pretty sure every American is out. Or basically everyone, like, I don't know if it's possible to get 100% of everything, but everybody that needed to get out essentially got out. In terms of people that were issued special visas or whatever, I don't know what the process is in terms of evacuating those people, or if it was possible even to evacuate all of them ahead of time. That seems like it sends mixed signals. I'm not entirely sure. But like the U.S. knew that it was going to withdraw fully like months earlier. I think in July, Biden was saying, we're gone by August 31st. If we would have stayed past that date, I don't know what the Taliban would have done. Again, there were some problems, but for the most part, we got everything out. We did what we needed to do. The Taliban aren't relying on our fucking weapons. We sabotaged all of those helicopters before we fucking left. The idea that the Afghanistan people that we left there weren't able to pilot those helicopters, but the Taliban are going to come in, fix them, and be able to successfully pilot them. Like, holy fuck, dude. The Taliban go over to fucking Pakistan and they get all their military shit. Or they're friends with fucking Putin. They get shit from Russia. I don't think they're hurting for arms at the moment. The Taliban are incredibly well funded and incredibly well armed. They didn't need to take some fucking scraps that we left for the ANA in order to bolster their forces. The Taliban are doing just fine. They were going to do fine whether or not they got any U.S. arms. Again, I think we're talking around this. We both agree that leaving was good. I take issue with you saying it was a disaster. I don't think that there are any other ways that could have happened. We can sit here and posit that we could have done A, B, or C, but I think that the potential negative fallout from all of those things could have been horrible. I think that a worst case scenario, which was absolutely avoided, and I think even you agree with this, the worst case scenario would have been if we did something and it provoked the Taliban and then we got attacked, and that attack instigated a troop surge because the U.S. public wants to see some sort of retribution. So that is the number one scenario that should have been avoided. Everything else is fucking water under the bridge as far as I'm concerned. We're out. We're done. We're not talking about it anymore. I think that's a massive success of the Biden administration. He did what Trump said he would do and didn't do. He did what Obama said he would do and didn't do. Fucking
gotta give a point.
We're going to leave Afghanistan. He didn't do it. So props to Biden for it. I think that's a major foreign policy success for him.
All right, and I'll just say real quick, the State Department said November 3rd that there are still 400 Americans that are trying to flee that haven't been able to do so. I don't know if they got any of them since November 3rd. That's the article I read. There's 14,000 people in Afghanistan that still have American citizenship, or I don't know if citizenship's the right word, but are allowed to be in America. My point in Afghanistan is real simple. I'm saying that it's this constant, like, sort of warmongering talking point that we're emboldening enemies. I don't think that just withdrawing would embolden our enemies. I think withdrawing in a feckless way is what emboldens, because they're like, holy shit, these people have no strategic ability with their military. I've already outlined specifically the easy steps that we could have taken that anyone with half a brain would have done to ensure that there was less damage that occurred. Just because saying, well, something even worse could have occurred, that's not a reason that Biden did good. But I'm ready to move on to another topic if you want, because I know we only have limited time.
Hey, Patty P, how we doing?
I would.
Hey, God bless Patty P. It's a salute from Roma. A salute from Nebraska. God bless Patty P. God bless. Glad to have you. Glad to have you tonight. Bandit. Also, Russia's making moves on pulling Ukraine has been taken. Interesting. God, what a world we're living in these days, huh?
Would like to talk a little about the corruption stuff, but I know you mentioned the infrastructure bill. So if you want to talk, it's up to you. We can talk about the infrastructure if you want.
So far, Rob's
I
ahead
think that
by 3 points,
this
but
was
Destiny's
part
still
of
in
the
swinging
hopefully
distance.
step one in a series of bills that'll be passed. But I think that the infrastructure bill seemed like it was not going to happen for a long time. But with only 50 Democratic votes, because we can't get any fucking Republicans to do anything, I think that the infrastructure bill that Biden passed is awesome. The idea that we were able to get anything passed is really good.
This is a thought that should get everyone pause. Lesto, anyone seeing vibes from why World War I and World War II started? Germany invaded Poland and no one stopped them. Alesto says China is mass producing and taking land. That should give folks pause.
Okay, well, the idea, I think that there are a lot of rhinos that are willing to go along to get along, particularly with so much of the pork that we see in the infrastructure bill. The bill itself is a catastrophe, but you could make this argument against Republicans and Democrats. Like, anytime that we're passing bills that are thousands of pages that people haven't read before they're voting for is a fucking disaster.
It's a
and
good
I don't think
thought,
it's a celebration to be like, well, a bunch of shithead rhinos went along to get along, probably because they were offered to really ruminate and things like that. The one thing I'll say real quick on it, because we don't have all night to talk about it, it seems that the general thesis that Democrats would like about this infrastructure bill is sort of that it's helping the average person, and the cost of it, we keep hearing it's already paid for, it'll be the wealthy paying. The SALT reductions that occur in this bill are going to massively benefit small millionaires, right? And so places like in California, where traditionally you were able to write off a lot of your taxes federally if you paid high state taxes, now that's going to be repealed. And this means that you're going to see a lot of millionaires in these places that are actually going to get tax breaks. So the idea that this is only going to benefit the poor and it's only going to be the rich paying for it is nonsense. And I think that I've already made my point of why it's bad for inflation reasons. And a lot of the Build Back Better plan that they're trying to link this to, the Green New Deal shit, is going to be an absolute disaster that'll make those supply chain and energy issues even worse that we talked about previously.
So I can't talk to anything about the Green New Deal. So the salt tax is the salt tax cap is a garbage fucking bullshit. I don't understand why anybody would approve of that. My understanding is that was basically pushed for under the Trump administration because it would exclusively hurt blue states that have higher state taxes, that salt cap. Getting rid of that cap, I think, was part of the negotiating that had to happen with Sinema. I think it might have been Manchin that pushed for getting rid of that salt cap. I don't remember, but getting rid of that cap, I think the main motivation was because it was something that came in under Trump, and it seems to only punish like blue states. So I think getting rid of the salt cap is fine. I don't think that this bill was necessarily sold exclusively as helping like working class Americans. Like, it's an infrastructure bill, not a working class American bill. And in terms of diverting a fuck ton of money to roads, bridges, bridge repair, all of that stuff, I think that that's a good thing to do. If we're saying, are you claiming that it's not going to flow to any of those things, that none of the infrastructure that the money is going to is actually going to go there?
Doesn't seem the majority is going to.
No. You don't have to take it from my mouth. Listen to the Democrats' mouth. They're literally claiming everything's infrastructure. I've had debates with people over and over on this. They'll say, well, obviously education's infrastructure because who builds the roads? The people that get educated to build the roads. Those are completely different things. Like, when we're talking about specifics. Now, even if you say schools are infrastructure, like the way people are trying to spin this, that everything is infrastructure, is horseshit. They're trying to throw in a bunch of language that was similar to the Green New Deal, injecting race. The roads are racist, the bridges are racist, and shit like this that has to do with their equity mindset that they're trying to achieve that'll be a disaster for the country. But I won't say that there's no money going to bridges and roads. I also won't say that we don't need a significant amount of money going to bridges and roads. That's absolutely true. And that sort of bill would have passed with Republican support. Now, make no mistake, I have no love for the Republican Party. I think many ways at the top, they're shitheads too. But they would have passed a bill that was just like, let's give shitloads of money just to bridges and roads. The problem was all of the extra stuff, which then only got through because all of the pork and stuff that they attached to it.
Wait,
and
what
we
is
can't
that?
say whether.
Sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, you mentioned like education. I don't think anything. Like I thought that all of that stuff ended up getting dropped, and they're trying to pass that with the Build America Better. Yeah.
Right. So the Build Back Better plan that they said is like a lock and a key, that we have to pass this infrastructure and then it will be in tandem with the Build Back Better, right? Like this is that these are where they're making all of these arguments that everything is infrastructure. Now, I'm not going to bullshit you and tell you I read the entire thousands of pages infrastructure bill. I haven't. I've seen some of the stuff that was in there. Some of it I've not.
And I just got to say, the lock and a key thing, we all know it's bullshit, but it's great persuasion. Because it's visual, you can imagine it. It's like, okay, they have to go together for it to all work. And so it gives people an out.
Big fan of some of it. Seems to make sense. We should be spending money on roads and bridges and things like that. The problem I have is, how can we determine whether or not this is a success when it's just been passed? So saying that this is a success for the Biden administration, we can see the economic numbers that are already being brought in under the Biden administration that are a fucking disaster, as we already went through. So I think it's a bit presumptuous, particularly when we have them just gaslighting people saying it'll cost nothing. Then we heard reports that actually Democrats are worried that when the CBO score comes out, guess what? It turns out they're going to say, actually, it's going to cost a lot, and the bill itself doesn't have the provisions to pay for it all. Now, we'll see what the CBO says, but the gaslighting to people, like pushing this equity message, everything is infrastructure, and it's all paid for, it costs $0, is bullshit.
So in terms of it all being paid for, I mean, oh God. I mean, technically everything is paid for, right? The government can print however much money it needs. In terms of like, have we done the necessary tax increases or whatever, get it done yet? I don't know if that's happened. I don't think that was part of this bill. I think that's part of the next one that they hope to pass. But in terms of like the infrastructure bill itself, I mean, the vast majority of the spending is on infrastructure. I don't think there was a lot of random pork that got attached to that. And you keep saying Republicans would support it. I don't believe there was a single Senate vote by the Republicans on this bill. I think it was completely down party lines, was it not?
No. No,
there was Republican support. I can't talk like we're just because I am ill-informed on the actual bill. I can't say that you're right that 99% of the bill is just roads and bridges. My understanding that was from the brief amount that I have read of it, that there was a lot more in it other than that. But maybe you're right. Maybe I'll look into it and it's all bridges and roads.
Sure. I mean, well, it's not all bridges and roads. Now, I have heard Republicans try to make some claims that it's not infrastructure, depending on what you're talking about. But like the vast majority of stuff. So, I mean, I read the line items, right? So 110 billion goes to building and repairing bridges and roads. 39 billion goes to modernizing and improving access to public transit. Did you not consider that infrastructure? 66 billion to revitalize passenger and freight rail, including updates in the Northeast Corridor. Like all of this stuff seems to
give Destiny a
42
point.
billion to modernize ports and
He does
airports,
his homework.
50 billion for weatherization, drought protection, and other climate resiliency efforts. 65 billion to increase access to reliable high-speed internet service. Some people say internet's not infrastructure. I mean, all of it looks like infrastructure to me. You are right.
But the devil's often in the details of what that means, where that money's going, as you know, right? Like, so you could say it's going to high-speed rail, but then it's going to some project that some hypothetical future high-speed rail that never comes through or whatever. I'm just saying, I understand, like, I don't know what the totality spent was, and that all of the, I'm not fast enough in my head to see if all that adds up to the 1.7 trillion or whatever the bill is, and to see what percentages they are. But I will say this, I think at least on the infrastructure bill.
Also, to be clear, hold on, I'm sorry, I want to be clear on this as well, because I actually totally missed the passage of this. Apparently 13 Republicans did sign on and vote for this in the Senate. So this did pass with bipartisan support. So I don't know, it seems like a really good bill. This is the largest spending bill in the history of the United States in terms of spending on infrastructure. I would consider, I mean, I guess we could conceive of some future where none of the money gets spent or something, which would make it a failure. But I think the passage of this bill in and of itself, I think is a massive legislative success. Biden has talked over and over again about how he was able to, or how he wants to bring other people on board to get something passed. And it seems like he's able to do it. So I would say that a big legislative success of the Biden administration.
Okay, I guess we'll have to wait and see what the bill, I mean, if the best you can come up with is this bill passed that we have We'll see if it does good or not. I don't
Okay,
think
to be
that's a
fair,
good-
I'm trying to defend Biden's administration.
Sure,
We're 1 year in. I can't give you like the most he could have passed was up to like 6 months ago, right? Like I can't. I mean, yeah, that's all I got.
I'm just making. We're
Uh-huh.
both making our case. That's all I'm doing.
Okay.
The last thing. I don't know how much time we have. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
There's a point at the end I
Yeah.
really wanted to get to, but just briefly to mention because I know we don't have time. Like, what do you think of like the scandal of the FBI being weaponized as basically a political tool to go after parents at meetings and things like that?
Yeah, I looked into that, and it seemed to be another one of those conspiracy theories that didn't hold any merit. I think that some Republicans were claiming that the FBI was being weaponized to attack parents that oppose CRT. But when I tried to look into like what the school board said about this, it seemed like the problems are that teachers are getting fucking death threats now from parents that think that they're like trying to like turn all their children into trans people or something, or they're trying to force CRT down their throats. And so I think there were requests being made to the federal government. Are there some like, can you look into some of these threats or something, or can you provide some sort of federal protection for teachers that are getting these types of threats? Which I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that.
It's clearly outrageous. It's far more than that, right? You say it's a conspiracy theorist, but that's often a tool people use when they don't want to look at facts that they're uncomfortable with.
Yeah, at this point, you could really make the argument that conspiracy theory is just kind of a pejorative for things you don't like. Like it's kind of taken that air at this point.
Because they don't have an answer. So let's look at exactly what happened, right? We saw that the National School Board Association recommended using tools like the Patriot Act to go after people that were upset at school board meetings. That NSBA letter, the National School Board Association letter, included about 22 examples that they were talking about. If you click on those examples, because they cited them all in their letter, when you clicked on it would be shit like this. It would say, in California, Arkansas, and Pennsylvania, there was problems at school board meetings. And then you click on those links. Problem at the California meeting. They had to shut down a meeting early because people got unruly. Problem in Pennsylvania. People were yelling. That's it. That's the sort of things. And then when you look at the most significant examples, here are some of the most significant. One time, someone made a Nazi salute at one of these school board meetings, mocking the school as being Nazis for their mandates that they had. So it wasn't an actual Nazi. It was someone mocking Nazis, which much like we saw with the people from the McAuliffe campaign, or the people in the name of defending McAuliffe that dressed up like, alt-righters, Nazis with tiki torches. The FBI didn't get involved in that for some reason. But anyways, the point I'm trying to make is this. There was only two instances in the National School Board Association letter where they recommended using the Patriot Act to go after parents where they cited actual crimes. One was a situation where it seems like someone harassed and possibly slightly assaulted someone in Illinois. That's bad.
Can you real quick, can you link me this thing where they recommended using the Patriot Act?
Sure.
Yeah.
Let me find it for you. Where would
Sorry, go ahead.
No problem.
I would also say, I mean, like also like as a teacher, if my guess, and I could be wrong, but my guess is teachers probably aren't used to parents doing Nazi salutes and shit in meetings. And based on the temperature right now in the United States of our political discourse, it wouldn't surprise me if some of them genuinely did feel threatened by parents that were doing that. When you say also that like a meeting is getting unruly, I don't know if that means there's grumbles in the back or if that's teachers and parents like screaming at each other. Yeah, I don't know. That sounds, I mean, I would have to have more information on that, but.
Well, here's what we need to know. Like, regardless, even so, again, the only other case. Does this have the text of the letter? Shit.
When you talk about the text of the letter, are you talking about this? The Justice.gov, the Justice Department addresses violent threats against school.
No. That's the memorandum that was sent in response. So, right when you set up, the NSBA sent a letter on a Wednesday to the White House, which we now know was coordinated. Whistleblowers told us was coordinated with the White House, and that NSBA letter, which it might take me a little while. I'm slow at so I'll get.
Also, real quick, what you're saying, that's pretty normal. There's going to be a lot of coordination when stuff like this happens, of course. But go ahead.
Well, no, not if you have it. Show me one example ever where we had the FBI collaborate with local law enforcement over people that were just using their constitution.
No, I'm your statement that the NSBA coordinated with the White House and the DOJ before sending a letter. It wouldn't surprise me if like a large organization of teachers that are publicly employed are going to communicate with the White House in terms of like what would be the best way to word this, or should we send this or that, or like there's going to be some level of coordination there. Like when people go after warrants with judges or whatever, there's a lot of coordination there. Like, well, what should we do, right? Like that's not a surprise. Like you stated that like it was a highly conspiratorial claim where there was like some scheming going on in the background, and I don't agree that that's all I was.
Okay, well, the reason that I state that is because then in effect what we have is
they don't
the
touch
White
on
House,
that at
the
all.
Biden administration helping craft a letter to give the excuse for the FBI to target parents.
Do they? I don't remember them
said
touching
that they
on it.
should use tools like the Patriot Act and treat these parents like domestic terrorists. And again, that letter in the examples they gave, they're fucking pathetic, which I'll get that letter to you. If someone has that letter in the chat, it'd be cool that you could post it. But it was the original National School Board Association letter that was sent to the Justice Department, right? Now, they've even since backtracked that letter. They apologized for the language that was used in that letter. And yet still, Merrick Garland, when he testified in front of Congress, said that the two reasons that he issued his memorandum to have the FBI look into this was, one, the National School Board Association letter, which, oh, by the way, the other criminal case that they cited was the gentleman in the county, I forget the name of the specific county, where his daughter was raped in a bathroom. And then he went to the school board meeting to protest the trans laws that were there because his daughter was raped by someone identified as trans in a bathroom. And the school board lied and said, oh, nothing ever happened. We don't have any incidents. And then someone told him to shut up, and he called that person a bitch and then was arrested. So that's literally one of the two incidents of arrest that the National School Board Association used to suggest that violence was occurring, was because someone was outraged that their daughter was raped and the school board was covering it up. So the school board had to backtrack on that. And yet Merrick Garland says, I used that school board letter, which he couldn't cite one case in that letter of examples of why he did this. And then he said, and I'm quoting now, he read news stories suggesting violence that had occurred towards teachers and had occurred towards school boards.
So like,
no, but real quick, just
let
let me finish this point. Even if you're for it, right, you should think before we have political opponents being targeted by the FBI, particularly parents, that there should be a damn good reason for it. That the FBI should have a database.
Man,
like,
Rob
wow,
is fucking
we
sharp.
looked into this. We've been looking into this for a month, and we found all of these examples. Merrick Garland couldn't give one. He just said, I heard about it. I heard about it in the news in the National School Board Association letter. Then the letter's retracted because they're like, yeah, we went too far with this letter. So
wait, so then the question is, so did the FBI actually do anything then? Or are you just upset about this letter?
No, now we have a whistleblower that actually came out and said Merrick Garland then lied when he said, well, we're just working with local law enforcement, but we wouldn't use the designation of terrorist or any of the tools that come with that designation in looking into parents. A whistleblower since came out last week and said that's exactly what they did. That he has information that proves that Merrick Garland's Justice Department and the FBI was looking at these parents as terrorists. Wait, hold on. That's not my question. Let's be more clear. So first of all, Merrick Garland, the DOJ is separate from the FBI, right? The FBI operates under its own executive authority and everything, right? Well, but the head of the DOJ, the person that could direct them, is the Attorney General. Who also heads the DOJ.
So my question though is, so if the FBI investigated somebody, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. My question is, did the FBI actually do anything that was wrong or bad here?
Well, they used investigative surveillance techniques, designated people as terrorists to be allowed to use those techniques.
So then the FBI. So then, to be clear, then, so what happened is, I just want to be clear about what we're complaining about, because we can argue about what we're complaining is bad, right? Because the original claim sounded like the FBI was like up to no good or was doing horrible things or designating people as terrorists. It sounds like what happened is the FBI investigated something, some of which might be domestic terrorist threats. I don't know if there was one that was improperly investigated, but it sounds like at the end.
Hey, Patty P, I'm doing fine. I'm doing as good as life can give. I hope everything is beautiful for you in Bella Roma.
Of the day, the FBI did their searches, nothing came up, and then they left it alone. That doesn't sound like a bad thing.
We have no evidence that they've ended. The memorandum's still on the books. After the NSBA withdrew their letter, everyone asked Merrick Garland, okay, are you going to withdraw your memorandum? He says no. So they can still be investigating.
Why Rob
and the point
got a
is
point.
this. If we would imagine this during the Trump administration, imagine that Bill Barr comes out and says, we've heard that there are people that protest ICE agencies that have been making threats to ICE agents. And so now we're going to use the FBI based on a letter that says that these people protesting ICE officers are potential terrorists and we need to use the Patriot Act. We're going to use the FBI to coordinate with local law enforcement to look into these groups. You know as well as I do that would have been found unacceptable. You can't use the FBI to target your political opponents.
Yeah, okay, hold on, wait, okay, I'm getting so confused on this. Hold on. The DOJ doesn't direct the FBI around, though. The FBI
Attorney General does.
I thought that the FBI answered to the oh God, isn't it the director of? Isn't it somebody else in the cabinet? I don't think that the DOJ can like tell the FBI, hey, you go do this, you go do that. The FBI operates independently of the DOJ. Now they'll report findings of investigators to the DOJ, but I don't think Merrick Garland can say like, hey, you guys go investigate that, or hey, you guys go do that. Like, because
that's exactly what he did. It says, well, within the U.S. Department of Justice, the FBI is responsible to the Attorney General and reports its findings to the U.S. attorneys across the country. The Attorney General is the boss of the FBI.
Okay, so then I guess so. If that is the case, okay, I don't remember the chain of reporting, but if that is the case, though, if the FBI, it seems like they haven't charged anybody or done anything wrong. I don't understand what the claim is.
Because you can't use the most powerful investigative and law enforcement agency in the history of the world to target political opponents to investigate them.
Right? You mentioned targeting political opponents, but it sounded like the issue that was being brought up was here are people that were either making threats or acting unruly or whatever in these cases, and then you can investigate those people based on those threats. Are you trying to say that the FBI was being utilized to just investigate all of these people, that investigations were opened up on every single, you say political opponents? I mean, did they check their like party affiliation first? Or I haven't seen anything like that at all. Like,
well, we know that one of the biggest unions that donates to the Democratic Party is the Teachers Union. The National School Board Association itself is big supporters of the Democratic Party. And most of these parents that are upset about things that traditionally are considered part of the Democratic platform, right? And
none of those things built anywhere towards, like, answer my question. Is yeah.
Sure. So it speaks to those being political opponents. And the point is this, right? It doesn't matter. Like, we understand that you have a right to privacy, right? That extends beyond to, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, don't worry about it, right? You understand that. You would never make that argument. So the idea that Merrick Garland used the FBI to look into angry parents, and he couldn't even cite specific examples of like, well, this is why we're doing it. He just said, I heard some things in some news reports in this National School Board Association letter.
Yeah, but when you say
literally had to withdraw the letter and apologize.
Let's be a little bit more clear in the legal process. When you say look into, that's doing a lot of lifting there, right? I could send an email to the FBI and say, like, Rob wants to kill X politician, right? The FBI will look into that, but them looking into it might be like they review a few videos, they look at my credibility as somebody that sent an anonymous tip, like, okay, we're not doing anything, right? Now, another look into could be, somebody said that guy is anti-CRT, and now you start subpoenaing all of his bank records, looking for peripheral crimes or look at whatever, you're trying to like take him down that way. That could be looking, right? So when you say like looking into, I like if the FBI was just reviewing tips, I don't see there being a problem there. Now, if the FBI is starting to like pull and freeze bank accounts and subpoena records and no file people, okay, well, that seems like it'd be pretty fucked up. But I expect the FBI to look into random tips, even if they come from shitty people like the NVSA or whatever.
But that's not what's going on, because Merrick Garland, his memo didn't say we've had some specific allegations that we're looking into. His memorandum talked specifically about cooperating with local law enforcement because there was a rash of bad things that were occurring with parents that were angry at school board meetings, right? And so it's saying, like, picture this.
That's fine. What you just said right there was fine. Cooperating with local law enforcement. If local law enforcement doesn't have anything bad to report, then I wouldn't expect the FBI to have much to say. But if local law enforcement is saying, yeah, go ahead.
Why would we want the FBI? Like, let's say you get one death threat, which you probably get more than one, but let's assume you get one. Would we expect the FBI to release a memorandum saying, we contacted streamer Destiny and he said he got a death threat, and so now we're working with local law enforcement to make sure that all of these people that don't like Destiny, that we're instructing local law enforcement that this is how we need to approach these type of people?
It depends on the case. For me personally, no. But if there was some body of people that felt relatively threatened in the United States because issues around their job were becoming highly politicized, and it seemed to be that at least some of these people were saying they felt like they were getting legitimate death threats, it wouldn't surprise me for the federal government to say, like, yeah, the FBI is going to team up with local law enforcement and try to do more investigations if it should warrant it. Because I don't know what powers local law enforcement have when it comes to tracking this kind of stuff. If you're like in some random, no offense, rural America, but if you're in some random fucking small shit town where your fucking local courthouse uses a fax machine still, right? I don't know what kind of research or investigative tools that these officers have available to them. It wouldn't surprise me if they put up. But like, I'm not interested in like did the FBI say that they were going to cooperate with local law enforcement? What I'm interested in is the FBI like improperly wielding their power, or have they been like doing improper things rather than them saying that like, yeah, we'll pledge some resources if something fucked up does happen?
Okay, so I'm not going to convince you, so I'll just put it this way. Trump wins in 2024, right? And he comes out and he says, there are a lot of people online and social media that community's been vocal, and there's been some threats offered behind the scenes in that. So we're going to use the FBI to cooperate with local law enforcement to go after left-wing streamers, because there's been a lot of threats made from that community. You're fine with that. You say, no problem. Not right-wing streamers, just the left-wing streamers. We're okay with that?
Okay, you keep inserting that, but you haven't demonstrated that. What do you mean? My understanding is that this isn't a political targeting. Or did the memorandum or did the DOJ say we're only going after Republicans? We're only going after right-wing people?
But let's not be naive. We know the people traditionally the political stance of the people that are upset at these school board meetings, that are upset with the school board. We know the traditional leanings of the school board people, of the teachers, and we know the policies and things that are being acted upon by these parents are left-wing causes that they don't like. Like,
sure,
we
but
don't have to be
this is
naive. We know what's
substantially
going on.
sure, but this is substantially different than if the president came out and said we're going after left wing or right wing people. That's way different than saying like we're going to go after everybody that happens to be left wing or right wing over a
Okay,
certain
then
thing.
fine.
But,
They say this. They merely say there have been a lot of people complaining about Republicans in office, so we're going to have the FBI look into the people that are complaining about Republicans in office.
I mean, like depending on what it was, sure. I can think of a better example for you that I would absolutely agree with, but maybe I seem like I don't like them anymore because of past things. But like if they were to say something like a lot of people tangential to the BLM organization seem like they've been making threats, we've paired up with local law enforcement and the FBI to investigate or whatever. Yeah, I'd be fine with that. That's okay. We've arguably already done that with right-wing groups like related to January 6th. So I mean, yeah, if you think that there are some domestic terrorists, there's something going on, I don't think there's any problem with local or federal law enforcement looking into that. That's fine.
But you don't do it with the little amount of proof that they have. Right? We heard some
again,
news stories.
it depends on what you do. You keep using this word, look into. And like I've said before, this is a huge like space of what does it mean? Look into could mean the FBI gets an email, they look at it, they show it to a few friends, they laugh and they delete it. Or it could mean like, we're going to start trailing this guy, okay? And we're going to fucking start pulling bank records and maybe freezing assets and no fly listing this guy because we think he's a threat. So if you can point on the other end of that spectrum and say, wow, the FBI has been like doing some crazy shit, all these people, then I'd say, well, maybe this is a problem if there was no reason to do it. But if you're just telling me that they've cooperated with local law enforcement and they're looking into these types of threats, that's what I would expect them to do.
I don't think that to get the FBI.
I disagree with a lot of what he just said there. I really do, but it's kind of like it was good persuasion, kind of like when you're watching the Rittenhouse trial, and it's like there were some times when there was some very persuasive stuff said by the other side, and so you have to acknowledge it when it's there. I don't agree with what Destiny says, but I'm trying to score this fairly, and what's the better persuasion points? And I do have to agree with what Alesto's saying here. And then DeFreak said it's called institutional intimidation. It's straight. Yeah, we're getting a lot more of that nowadays, aren't we?
FBI involved in such a small level where the memo talks about how they're going to work with law enforcement, they're going to prosecute threats and things like that. That's the role of local law enforcement, unless they're being completely overwhelmed or not. But the last thing that I want to talk about, like can you at least admit that if Trump had done this after groups that we traditionally consider Democrat, such as groups complaining about ICE agents, that maybe not you, but so many Democrats would have lost their fucking mind and said, Bill Barr is using the FBI to target people that are against Trump. Can you at least admit that?
I'm trying to think if this actually happened, if there's like an example. Because like, I mean, like because under Trump, because my position under Trump was generally that it seemed like a lot of these agencies operate far more independently than people seem to think. Like, I don't think that the president can just wield power and direct these three letters to just do whatever they want. And their independence was definitely tested under Trump. And it seemed to be that they have a large degree of independence when it comes to their operations. Whether they
But they even said Bill Barr, even saying that, Democrats overwhelmingly said Bill Barr was his stooge and all these things Bill Barr was doing was to benefit Trump. So
I mean, didn't Trump do this to some extent when he directed all of as much as intelligence as he?
Oh, if you're like, honestly, there was two prosecutors, Binger and Krause. Krause was incredibly unpersuasive just throughout the trial, but Binger's closing statement, I watched it and I was like, oh, motherfucker. I didn't agree, but it was a masterclass in persuasion. So it's one of those that's like, that's almost worth examining. Like, if you really disagree with a position, but you can appreciate the persuasion that's being utilized by it, that's something.
He can to look over voting machines. Didn't Trump say, and then didn't Bill Barr, wasn't he one of the people like, us, I'm looking over what the FBI reported to me, and the FBI went over these voting machines. And I feel like when that happened, I was like, okay, fine. If they want to look into it, they can. And they did. And there was nothing there. Didn't Trump direct like all the federal courts? Or no, he didn't direct federal courts, but they were like pushing cases.
Keep in mind, Alesto, persuasion is not always dealing with the truth. Persuasion is about getting outcomes. And that's why I highlight persuasion, so people can understand when persuasion techniques are being used against them.
With voter fraud and shit. And I mean, like, that's his right to do it. If he wants to investigate that stuff, he can. I mean, they didn't find anything, but
I don't know. Regardless. So the last thing I wanted to ask you, because I know we're running out of time, is just like, do you think that Joe Biden's personally responsible? And do you put this as a a ding on his record that he said that Kyle Rittenhouse was a white supremacist. Right? He put those tweets out there. And I know from past conversations I've had with you, look at how fucking crazy that we have our national media and so many Democrats now of what that's led to. It may have led to this parade murder that we saw in Waukesha. We don't know yet because the same media that was calling Kyle Rittenhouse a white supremacist, strangely silent on a black gentleman killing white people who put his hatred of white people and Hitler quotes and things like that in his social media.
So I tried to look for this because people claim this, and if he did say that, that was really bad. But I don't think Biden ever called Rittenhouse a white supremacist. I think what happened was there was some speech he gave where he mentions white supremacy, and then in like the Twitter video, I think there's a picture of Rittenhouse that comes up. Now I think that's shitty, but I don't think there was ever a time where Biden said Kyle Rittenhouse is a white supremacist, or if he did, I missed it. And in terms of like Biden's response to everything, I thought he had a great response when he came off the there was either a plane or he was like walking through a plane or whatever, and people.
Oh boy, Alesta, I think there was a movie called Liar Liar that actually covered this subject matter. Bandit, after watching the whole trial, I didn't find what he said is, the technique was there though. You have like, I did not agree with a lot of what that prosecutor said, but the technique was definitely there. Alesto, that's perfectly fine. If you took what Binger said, no context, only Binger persuaded them. Well, in my opinion, I think the jury deliberation probably took an extra day just on Binger's closing statement, just on the power of that. I think that's what at least caused one more day of deliberation, personally. And they get into that here shortly.
People are like, what do you think about the verdict? And he's like, the courts ruled as the courts did. And I thought that was fine.
But he also said that in other ports that he was angry, right? And that's one of the problems with Biden, right? And by
Wait,
the way,
angry about what? Hold on. That's a really vague, angry? What do you mean? Biden could be angry about a lot of things.
Angry about the decision.
Well, I'm being asked here, what was the technique? Well, the most obvious one, and without, because I was thinking about going over the entire closing statement. I mean, it's not that it's as relevant now, but just going over it just to go over the different persuasion techniques. But a good example here was when he pulled out the gun and he pointed it, and they're talking about like, oh, he's pointing at the jury. Now, what he was doing there is putting the jury in the place of the people that Kyle killed rather than in the place of Kyle himself. He was trying to basically, he's trying to shift their perspective and shift their frame. And it would have worked if the defense attorney didn't ask to see the gun themselves, because once the defense attorney picked it up, it demystified it as an object. Because when the prosecution picked up, we were all like, oh, and then when the prosecution got done, we were like, dude, that was fucking pretty good. And I mean, I didn't agree with it, but like, that was well done. And then when the defense picked it up, it demystified the object. And I think that was basically what probably saved it for Kyle. Alesto, I think so as well, but with the evidence that was presented contradicted what Binger said. But totally disingenuous from Destiny to have a picture of Rittenhouse saying white supremacists and propaganda at the least. Also, Biden didn't say Kyle was a white supremacist, but insinuated it at KR. Alesto says that is the illegal part of Biden insinuating KR is white supremacist. I'm wondering, I don't think like Kyle's like starting to talk about, you defame my character, Joe Biden. I don't think he can bring civil suits against a sitting president of the United States. Otherwise, surely somebody would have brought one against Trump. So who knows?
About the verdict.
I thought he said, my understanding was before he's like, trust the jury process, trust the decision.
Pure maliciousness.
What do you mean? Or I'd have to check.
Let me see what I can find. Here's the problem. Biden could say two different things on two different days.
I mean, depending on what we're talking about.
This is from CNBC. President Biden said Friday that he and many Americans feel angry and concerned about the acquittal of Kyle Rittenhouse.
So I'm seeing the statement by President Biden, the official one. While the verdict in Kenosha will leave many Americans feeling angry and concerned, myself included, we must acknowledge that the jury has spoken. I think that's fine.
Right. But then he says the exact opposite. He says, I'm angry about the acquittal.
Right.
Like, and this is what I'm saying. Yes, someone in Biden's camp wrote him a nice letter and said, here's what you say. But then when he's shooting his mouth off himself, he says, I'm angry about and concerned about the acquittal.
Wait, hold on, wait.
I
That's the exact opposite of what you just said. So when Biden was just running his mouth, Biden said, hey, I trust the jury process. That's what he said when he was campaigning. Now, this is the official statement that was put on the whitehouse.gov, which seems to be a lot more tactfully done. And this is the one that's like, we must acknowledge jury spoken. I know that Americans are feeling angry and concerned, myself included, but like, it seemed like when he was just shooting from the hip, it was just like, oh yeah, the jury spoke.
Right. I'm getting mixed up then. I thought it was the exact opposite. I thought you're saying the pre-written statement sounds pretty
I'm sure
good.
that went over
but what
real
Biden
well.
originally
DeFreak.
said that he was angry about the acquittal. That was him being asked in person.
That's kind of funny. DeFreak goes, Charles Manson tried to get his trial dismissed because of what Nixon said during the trial. I'm sure the judge is like, oh, let me get right on that. Bandit, I think the distinction is if the actions occurred while present versus prior to, might have a case there.
Regardless, it doesn't matter.
Wait, okay, hold on. Wait, one
I'm
of us
sure
is
there's
mixed. I don't
some
know who.
attorney that'll say you got a
the
case.
video that I remember seeing was he was walking from the left to the camera, and reporters are like, Biden, what do you think about the whatever? And I think he said something along the lines of like, I trust in the jury process. The jury has spoken. And then here is I don't know where I can link this, but if you Google statement President Biden Kenosha,
okay.
On the website is the formal. While the verdict in Kenosha will leave many Americans feeling angry and concerned, myself included, we must acknowledge that the jury has spoken.
Okay. Well, then I am confused. That's even worse then. So the official statement is that he's angry about the verdict. And look,
Hey, if you're trying to get in shape, stop scrolling for a second
rotten
and listen to me. I got something.
bastard of advertisements. He's trying to sell us some. You get in shape in 30 seconds a day with my incredible you do my sit-up regime and drink my shakes, and you'll be just 30 seconds a day is all I need.
by the writing off of, well, okay, he didn't specifically call Kyle Rittenhouse a white supremacist. He just used the image of Rittenhouse while saying Trump was defending white supremacy. Like, this, you've dealt with the insane fucking progressives and how insane they are on this issue.
Uh-huh.
You don't think that this occurring at the top levels, Kamala Harris said something very similar.
Mm-hmm.
She said, yeah, I'm angry about the verdict. You don't think that the sort of gaslighting that started with Joe Biden, who injected race into so much, even saying that the reason he decided to run was because Trump said Nazis could be good people, also a lie. You don't think that that has any influence on the media and on these insane people that you're dealing with on a daily basis now?
Yeah, so I disagree with some of Biden's messaging at the top about that. Absolutely. But
yeah, I contend that the Fine People hoax is one of the most dangerous hoaxes in American politics.
he didn't call Rittenhouse a white supremacist directly. That's what I was contesting. In terms of like, do I agree with the messaging at the top about that? Not necessarily, but I think Biden did a better job than the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party. When Biden was running, he condemned the riots explicitly. When other Democrats seemed a little bit afraid to, he actually was coming out saying that like we can't have riots. So I approve of him there. I mean, like, could he be more clear on the white supremacy thing? Yeah, probably. But the whole Democratic Party is pretty lost down that road. They'll either come back or lose all their next elections. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. But yeah, I just real quick, just finish it up. Like, I do think
that we're gonna get to too. So.
Yeah. So just to finish this point, I'll just say this: like, I think that Joe Biden, a lot of times, the people that are running his campaign want to have their cake and eat it too, and they want to pay lip service and kind of deflect when there's riots that are going certain ways, and they want to inject race and shit when it benefits them. And then when it gets out of hand, and they're like, "Well, we're more moderate. What the fuck are these crazies doing?" You created that monster. The media created that monster. The prominent Democrats that are more centrist, they allowed that shit to go in their own party, and they created that monster. And that's another reason that I think, message-wise, that Joe Biden's presidency is a failure.
I mean, maybe, but my argument has always been both sides. I attack the left a lot for driving the right into a lot of crazy positions. And I'll continue to do so because I think that people that get extreme on the left do drive the right into a lot of positions. But on the flip side, I think a lot of people on the right have driven a lot of people to the left into extreme positions as well. There are a lot of people that go very far left on a lot of things. But I mean, like, that's because people on the right were pushing equally crazy as much in the past. Now, we don't hear them as much anymore because so far they're losing the culture wars. Now, maybe the pendulum will swing in a few years or maybe next year. But like when you got Republicans out here saying shit like, trickle down economics, we just need to keep giving more tax cuts to businesses, like this is helping America, blah, blah, blah. Or when you've got them, saying crazy shit like, we had like the whole everything related to the war on drugs. When you've got everything related to how incarceration is done in the United States. Now, I know we can talk about Trump trying to do something with that First Step Act, but he didn't even fucking fund it when they passed their next budget. And Trump is barely Republican anyway. But there absolutely has been a huge push to the left in terms of them getting pretty crazy on things. But I think a lot of that was driven by a lot of people on the right pushing that direction as well. And now I agree that there are a lot of people being pushed very extreme right on things, and the left is doing that. But I mean, like both of these things play into each other together. You know, I've been doing like politics now for like 5 or 6 years. I understand why things have gone as far left as they have, and now I see why things are going as far right as they have. And yeah, it sucks, but I mean, people are I don't know what to say about that.
Well, I'll just say real quick, on a lot of those issues you talk about, I would find myself to be not far right, like prison reform, I think is necessary. War on drugs and stuff, I think stupid largely. So yeah, I get what you're saying, but I think that we see that there is a bigger problem now, and it's more fierce, right? It's more pointed. Like when you're talking about race and calling people, it's one thing to say, I'm for tax cuts and like gaslighting people on that. It's another thing to be like, that fucking guy's a racist and you support racist if you support him. That's going to cause more of a vitriolic reaction, and that will make people this is why I'm so adamant that we could never accept political violence, because you see these fuckheads on the left and it's going to drive people to the right that are like, I'm allowed to use violence because you're a racist, because you're a Nazi, because you don't want trans people to exist. All of which is bullshit 99.9% of the time they say it. But they gym themselves up into such a fury. And to see our president and our vice president kind of go along with this, it's too late. Like they can't pull the reins in because they already did this shit. And they had a chance the other day. The last chance was when they asked Psaki, is Biden willing to step back from those comments he made, kind of pointing to Rittenhouse being a white supremacist? They said no. They're not going to do it. So I'm sorry. The crazy shit that you're dealing with, it goes straight to the top with the Biden administration.
Sure, but I mean, like, I know why people are as left as they are now. Like, it's not that crazy, you know? We don't hear this rhetoric anymore because we moved into kind of a different era. But Jesus Christ, I remember growing up when I was a staunch fucking Republican, my response to every single fucking thing a Democrat said was, you hate this country. You're not patriotic. You hate the country. You hate the troops. You don't support Iraq. You don't support Afghanistan because you fucking hate the troops. You want our fucking military to die. You want all these people to die, right? This is the rhetoric that Republicans have been giving for the past, decade or 2 decades. Jesus Christ, in terms of every single possible Democratic argument. Anytime you say like, oh, like maybe we could have more minimum wage. Oh, maybe we can do, maybe more for education. Oh, you want to be like Europe because you fucking hate America, right? Well, Jesus Christ, if you tell a group of people for long enough they fucking hate the country, maybe some of them will start to fucking hate the country. If loving America means supporting massive amounts of war,
I don't think that point means what Destiny thinks it does, and I don't think it's nearly the big grandiose point that he was really thinking it was, because it's one of those, well, God, if you're going to keep saying we hate the country, we're just going to start hating the country. It could just be that the people who are saying that you're not really all that invested in America's success and you have more of an investment in an internationalist ideal. Could be they were just right the whole fucking time. What do you fucking know, huh? Boy, fucking howdy. It's strange. Alesto, that is the problem. Destiny is only looking at the time he started and not the past. Anyone that studies the past is seeing trends today. Well, yes, obviously. You have to study the past to understand your future trends. Sounds like whataboutism. Kind of. Now, I think he makes a pretty good point going forward here, but
supporting the incarceration of people for fucking smoking marijuana means not approving of things like gay marriage or any other socially left issue. Like, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that now we've got a generation of people that are on the left that, yeah, maybe they do say fuck America because you've told them for their entire fucking lives that advocating for things like an increase in the fucking minimum wage means you're anti-patriotic, or saying maybe we shouldn't go to war with all these countries in the Middle East. Oh yeah, well you fucking hate the United States. Okay, well fuck it, I guess you do. Like, I empathize with you a lot because I've been on both sides of it, both in what I believe in and in what I fight against. That rhetoric that is extreme on one side can drive people to the other direction, but it feels like sometimes we have the memory of goldfishes politically, that we remember for the past 2 or 3 years that Democrats, or at least people on the internet, and even some Democrats will call every motherfucker that disagrees with them, you're racist. What's that? You don't believe that we should do this? You're a fucking racist. That's shitty when Democrats say it. It's horrible, and it does drive people further right. But god damn, before that, hearing every fucking Republican say like, oh, you want to, you think that gay people should be allowed to marry each other? You hate the family. You hate religion. You hate Christians. You're trying to take away Christmas on Starbucks cups. You want to destroy this fucking country. You want gay people to get married. You're going to be fucking dogs in the street next. Like, holy shit. It happens on all sides. It's not unique to the left. It's been going on. We definitely need to find a way to turn it the fuck down. I don't know where that happens, but it sure as fuck know that it doesn't just come from one side.
Well, I would never claim that it came from one side. And the point is that even when that shit was happening, like, so I'm 37, right? I remember when that shit was happening. Like, for example, I'm pro free speech. There used to be this asshole lawyer named, I think it was Jack Thompson. He was big on
The
like
video
Mortal
game
Kombat,
guy.
Grand Theft Auto,
Yeah.
like and it's like censorship from the right has a large history, right? Lenny Bruce, one of my favorite comedians. Who was he being censored by? People that were pro-Catholic Church. The comic book code. Where was that censorship coming from? The right. But even back then, there was a lot of cultural pressure that, particularly with younger people, where it was kind of like, no, there was pushback on that in some of our major institutions. But you're right that there was definitely times when the right was worse with a lot of this stuff. The problem is now we see almost every cultural institution going the same direction, almost every one. And there's no letting up. Like the message is just hammered down your throat even more and more and more. And the recommendations of what to do and what you're justified to do with people you disagree are worse and worse and worse. And what I'm worried about is, you're right, pendulum swing. And when the pendulum swings too far the other way, there I'll fucking be arguing against that as well. But right now, in the situation we find ourselves, there is no doubt that the cultural power and the most extreme and vitriolic stuff is coming from the left. It's just true. Maybe it'll
Good
be
call.
different by the time I'm 60, and I'll fight against that.
I mean, you still have large people on the right that say things like the election is fake, and there's
That's
problems
different.
on the left. I agree, but we could go back and forth. We probably are circling the drain, and we probably kind of agree most.
Yeah,
of
yeah,
this
I'm
stuff.
done. I'm done.
We get to the
Let's
Q&A
do
now?
questions.
All right. Man, guys, I'm really looking forward to watching this back on tube.
All right. So now they're at the Q&A. The debate is concluded. The score is in, and it looks like Rob takes it by 2 points. Destiny 7, Rob 9. So congratulations to the winner of this debate, from the greatest judge, the king of judges, the king of extreme, the king of handsomeness, the king of sartorial resplendency, your king of extreme, Phil K.O.E. And yes, wait, I need to have... yes, you need Clinton plot armor. That's hilarious. I'm sorry. That is actually pretty damn funny. So, folks, there you have it. Destiny 7, Rob 9. That is how your King of Extreme would definitely have to score this game. It was pretty close at points, and at first, Destiny had Rob way on the back foot, but Rob was able to claw himself back from the precipice, and he was able to score the W, get the V. So, Rob, well done, sir. Well done. But, folks, I just wanted to have a little chat with all y'all over this debate. And as I'm known to say around here, all that being said, thank you for joining me here at the K.O.E. Nation for this debate roundup and review. Destiny versus Rob. I am the devilishly handsome outlaw himself, your King of Extreme, Phil K.O.E., the man of the hour, the man with the power, the man that makes the other podcast cower. Your King of Extreme, Phil K.O.E., the Lord of the Scottish Highlands, the Prince and Potentate of the political parlance, and one damn handsome man, if I do say so myself. If I hope to find every last one of you back here, happy, healthy, much the wiser. Alesto, thank you for being here, and I hope everything works out for you. DeFreak, thank you for being here. Bandit, you guys, you were really the super fans of the night. Like, God bless every last one of you. And also, if you're still watching, I'm trying to find, there we go. Patty P, God bless if you're still watching. But every last one of you people, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. I am your King of Extreme, the most extreme man that there ever was in all God's creation. And you know, folks, this is the end of Thanksgiving weekend. So you know what? I'm going to end it with something a little bit different here. I'm going to end this week with another showing of my poem of the week here, folks, and that's going to be what ends it this week for all y'all here at the K.O.E. Nation. I'm really, really glad to have all of you here this evening. God bless every last one of you, and this has been a great Thanksgiving weekend, and I hope you have a great one with you and yours as well. Thanks to Freak. I always love doing it. It's just good fun. God bless you. Take care, my man. How we doing, everybody? Happy Thanksgiving. I thought this would be a perfect occasion to read Ralph Waldo Emerson's Father, We Thank Thee. This is his own Thanksgiving poem, if you will, a Thanksgiving prayer even. So without further ado, Father, We Thank Thee by Ralph Waldo Emerson. For flowers that bloom about our feet, Father, we thank Thee. For tender grass, so fresh, so sweet, Father, we thank Thee. For the song of the bird and hum of bee, for all things fair we hear or see, Father in heaven, we thank Thee. For blue of stream and blue of sky, Father, we thank Thee. For pleasant shade of branches high, Father, we thank Thee. For fragrant air and cooling breeze, for beauty of the blooming trees, Father in heaven, we thank Thee. For this new morning with its light, Father, we thank Thee. For rest and shelter of the night, Father, we thank Thee. For health and food, for love and friends, for everything Thy goodness sends, Father in heaven, we thank Thee. So there you go, folks. I thought that would be appropriate for Thanksgiving. So for all of your friends, family, everybody that you love, and for all you and yours, I hope you have a very marvelous, wonderful, safe Thanksgiving. I hope to find all of you back here happy, healthy, much the wiser. Until next time, I'll catch you later. And of course, happy Thanksgiving, folks.
Tell you what I'll do if I ever get back. I promise to refabricate you raging rivers of gold. That's what the brochure advertised. And now we're lost. We gotta take it down. Let your gowns